Commentary on breaking news.
It is 10:33 on Wall Street. Time for a Bloomberg Opinion segment. Max Neeson, biotech, pharma, and healthcare columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, joins us. Max, you've got a great column out, and I love the title here, the headline, To Fight COVID-19 This Fall, Get a Flu Shot. Talk to us about the flu shot. Do people actually get this thing? Does it work? And how could it help in the pandemic 19 world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we're seeing with cases spiking in a number of U.S. states is pretty clear confirmation that COVID-19 is going to be around in a significant way for some time to come, considering that, many states never quite got it under control and have sort of proceeded with openings without necessarily having developed the sort of track tracing, isolating capabilities they need to keep incidence low over the long run. That means we'll have cases in the fall as, you get the seasonal return of flu. And these are viruses, diseases that can look similar, both of which can land people in the hospital. And, in combination, if you get a particularly severe flu season, you have the potential to further overwhelm healthcare and hospital systems and create a lot of extra sort of confusion and fear from people that might think they have COVID but have flu, and then potentially go get tested, and just a lot more burden on testing and healthcare providers. So in terms of something that the federal government and state governments can do ahead of time, ahead of that potential result, is roll out to a greater extent a flu vaccination program. Try to get a higher proportion of the population vaccinated. And while the effectiveness of the flu vaccine can vary depending on the strain and to what extent vaccine developers get it right, I nearly always provide some degree of protection, and really ahead of the autumn, anything that we can get to reduce the burden is worthwhile.
So really the argument, Max, has nothing to do with coronavirus itself. It's just this may help you not get flu, which will help the system in terms of not overwhelming hospitals or doctors' offices, and it may keep you away from coronavirus-plagued areas as well, should they re-emerge. What about the different strains of flu? What's the likelihood that this season's flu vaccine will work better than other seasons, if at all?
That's something that we won't know much about until the flu virus actually starts to circulate. But, I think a couple extra things to add on why this effort is worthwhile. First is, the flu will already have a harder time if people are taking some degree of distancing steps, masking, using greater hygiene efforts, adding even, an average or less than average vaccine on top of that should lead to a much less acute season, and then that's worthwhile. On top of that, any effort to expand vaccination, get people connected with providers, create, more accessible vaccination sites, target the sorts of population that don't always get vaccinated, that can be reapplied, reused in the future when we get a COVID vaccine, because, it's not just getting to a vaccine, but getting it in enough of a population that you can have that sort of broad protective effect. That's going to be a huge challenge, and anything we can do to build that infrastructure ahead of time while doing something else useful should be very helpful.
So, Max, I know this is a very fluid area here, but give us a sense of kind of where we are in terms of the vaccine. I know we've got many groups, many companies, many research universities working towards it. Kind of give us just the 30,000-foot view of where we are right now.
Still in very early stages. We just got some limited data from a vaccine out of China, Sinovac vaccine. And, it looked, it's what you wanted to see, some degree of immune reaction, no severe safety events. But as with Moderna, pretty limited data disclosure. We're really, there's going to be sort of a low bar for moving into larger studies because we want to try as many different vaccine approaches as possible. It's going to be some time before we have a really solid sense of what's likely to succeed and when and what the most effective vaccines will be. So still early days, but lots of progress being made.
Now, we have openings in a lot of places. Retail outlets in England selling non-essential items open today for the first time. Obviously, places like New York are beginning to reopen as well. But Dr. Anthony Fauci suggested bans on travel to the United States may remain until a vaccine arrives. How likely is that, Max?
I think it depends on the situation going forward. And some of those will be, directed at other countries that still have severe outbreaks. Other countries may be hesitant about letting people travel here, considering that the virus continues to circulate at high rates. It all depends on the extent to which, states take action to keep renewed outbreaks under control, continue to do all of the many things governments can do independent of the vaccine to keep incidence low in the long run.
Well, I would urge everybody to keep up with Max's writings. He's writing a lot of Bloomberg opinion pieces on the actual infection.
Yeah, absolutely, Vonnie. It's it's interesting to see here. There's a couple of paths here. We've got the path towards treatments of the illness as well as vaccines, and we know that again, healthcare companies, research universities, doctors and scientists across the world are working towards this, and people are just kind of waiting bated breath to see kind of how this progresses, and hopefully we can get a vaccine sooner rather than later.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks to Max Neeson, Bloomberg opinion columnist. Paul, I just want to mention a headline crossing the Bloomberg about JCPenney. It's become the latest company now to announce Juneteenth, an annual company holiday. More and more companies doing this. Yep. Let's get now to the 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. to Nathan Hager for World and National Headlines.
Thanks, Vonnie. The Supreme Court just expanded federal protections in the workplace to the LGBTQ community. In a pair of rulings, the justices found the Civil Rights Act's ban on job discrimination based on sex applies to gay and transgender workers. Conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch and Chief Justice John Roberts joined the court's four liberals in the 6-3 majority. More than half of states don't cover sexual orientation or gender identity in their own anti-discrimination laws. Also today, the High Court turned away 10 appeals aimed at broadening gun rights. They included challenges to laws in New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Maryland that make it harder to get a permit to carry a gun in public, as well as challenges to assault weapons bans in Massachusetts and the Chicago area. The police shooting of a black man by a white police officer in Atlanta is sparking fresh outrage weeks after the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks was shot twice in the back as he tried to flee an arrest in a Wendy's parking lot late Friday night. Justin Miller is an attorney for Brooks's family.
You can see the officer reach for the gun before Mr. Brooks turns around with the taser. I mean, that's clearly visible in the video. So he was already going in that direction, going to the lethal force direction.
President Trump has said he's working on an executive order on police reform. An aide tells Fox News it would expand the use of social workers and other co-responders and could come out this week. A large Black Lives Matter banner that had been draped on the front of the U.S. Embassy in Seoul, South Korea, is down now. The embassy tweeted an image of it over the weekend, saying it was in support for the fight against racial injustice and police brutality. Sources tell Bloomberg both President Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo were displeased by the display. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need to know.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. You can do your bit by continuing to work from home if you can and avoiding public transport. If you have to use public transport, from today you must now wear a face covering at all times. Avoid peak hours and wash your hands before and after travel. For everyone's safety, we regularly clean our services with antiviral disinfectant and will be providing hand sanitizer across our network. For more information, search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Newlywed to newborn. Ordering out to tucking in. Dream car to driveway. Isn't it nice when things arrive quicker than expected? Enter your location into our digital new car locator and it instantly tells you if the BMW you want is available nearby. So it'll be with you quicker than you might think. Search BMW new car locator today.
There's lots to discover when you join Tesco Mobile, like our big deals on big data SIMs, including our 8 gig SIM for just £10 a month. You'll also find great service with 99% UK network coverage. Visit us in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of the 7th, 12-month contract and unlock 4G enabled phone required. Phased policy applies 99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK. Charges and terms at tescomobile.com/terms.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, then throw the tissue away. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Disinfect surfaces, bottles, handles, knobs, and other places touched often. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Kill O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
Who says only the experts get to do the talking? On the Scuttle Puck NHL Hockey Podcast, irreverent outsiders Mike Bond and Dale Horde give their untrained opinions on all things hockey from the fans' perspective.
I don't know how you get those guys out of there. And Crosby, as great as he's been, it's just such a different era, so it's tough with the... he didn't have the crazy number of points that Orr, Lemieux, and Gretzky did. They just...
Search Scuttle Puck on TuneIn to listen.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks have begun this week in the red. Treasuries are up on signs that a second wave of the pandemic is emerging. The dollar is stronger against most other major currencies. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P is down over 1%, down 32. Dow's down 1.5%, down 369, and the NASDAQ is down 0.5%, down 48. The 10-year is up 7/32, the yield 0.67%. West Texas Intermediate is down over 2% at $35.52 a barrel, while COMEX Gold is down 0.7% at $17.2510 an ounce. The dollar yen, 107.22. The euros, $1.1289, and the British pound, $1.2569. BP will make the biggest write-down on the value of its business since the Deepwater Horizon disaster a decade ago, as the coronavirus hurts the long-term oil demand and accelerates the shift to cleaner energy. In a dramatic revision that prompted questions about the affordability of its dividend, the British giant cut its estimates for oil and gas prices in the coming decades between 20 and 30%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
He runs one of the biggest public pension plans in the country, second to maybe only one other. Let's bring in now Chris Ailman, Chief Investment Officer at CalSTRS, the California State Teachers Retirement System. Chris, welcome back.
Well, Vonnie, it's good to be back. We're number 2 in assets, but we're number 1 in everyone's heart.
That's what I was hinting at there, Chris. Well, let's get straight to it then. Have you had to revise what you're assuming you're going to make in returns over the next several years?
Well, we haven't changed our long-term assumptions because it's a 30-year average, Vonnie. But what we have done is reassessed, and the key word was when the Fed said interest rates are going to stay at 0 through 2022. That's a powerful statement. And so the next 5 years will probably be lower returns, although the last time the Fed did that, we had double-digit returns for those 5 years. So risk assets may be profitable during this time period. We have to get through the health crisis, but I think that we're going to see very low returns, obviously out of fixed income, corporate credit, anything with variable rates that reset. But that means that equity investments and growth investments may have a chance to use that free money, that financing.
So, Chris, your counterparts at CalPERS, they were talking about needing to maybe eye more private equity to leverage and maybe even more leverage to boost returns, i.e. making the portfolio a little bit more riskier in order to generate the returns that they need. How do you view that?
Yeah, Ben Ming's a new CIO there. He's really taking a comprehensive look at the portfolio, and we're all seeing a trend that the Canadians have used, some of the Dutch pension plans and Danish pension plans have used, which is to, when interest rates are 0, you borrow money and leverage, and you go into growth assets. But I think there's a natural, for a public pension, there's got to be a limit to that. And that's what everybody wants to explore. You want to use that lower cost money as an opportunity to buy into things like real estate. Private equity should take advantage of it, obviously, but also just across the portfolio. But there are natural limits. No one has defined that, but probably not more than 20%, 30% leverage. We have a leverage policy. We actually monitor that very closely. You take leverage in real estate. Everybody buys their home with, 20% down, maybe 30% down. So they're leveraging over half. A public pension plan would be doing just the opposite, barely leveraging the portfolio, Paul. But it's simply because the fact that the Fed has signaled rates are going to be so low for so long. That's very inexpensive money that allows you to invest in other places, but not until the health crisis is resolved.
And can I point out, Chris, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys would actually have been doing a little bit more of this than other retirement systems for a long time. You've always been a little more into real estate, a little riskier when it comes to venture and growth and even fund of funds and alternatives generally, right?
Well, Vonnie, spot on. You've known me for almost 2 decades, I think. We do tilt a little heavier toward real estate than most public pensions. State of Washington, ourselves, Oregon, there's a lot of funds that have a fairly large allocation to private equity. At our fund, it's currently about 10% going to 13%, which is a big dollar amount. And, the returns in private equity are going to come down, but they're going to be helped by this lower money. And the reason they're going to come down is simply competition. There's just too much money chasing too few deals. And before the health crisis, private equity companies were paying top dollar for any kind of an investment. And that usually means lower returns going forward. So we're still going to stay in the space, but it's going to be less of a return than you used to see in, say, the 90s or the 2000s. We think a broadly diversified portfolio is going to help you through this. Growth investments, once we get out of the health crisis, growth investments will be attractive to people. And that could be even in U.S. and non-U.S. stocks. The world has had so many geopolitical challenges. If Europe could get its act together, Japan could finally start growing again. You've got some investment opportunities. Big if at the start of those. And again, I have to keep caveating. We got to get through this health crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. That's paramount for everybody, I think, it goes without saying. But Chris, talk to me about your real estate holdings and what your view on real estate is right now, because I think that sort of has split people in two, right, as to what they are anticipating in terms of inflation, as to what they're anticipating in terms of how, structurally life will change after this.
Good point, Vonnie. Right now real estate is fairly frozen. There are no transactions, so there's no price information to figure out where things are. Going into this, real estate was pretty much priced to perfection. The real estate our team was doing was more build to core, as we describe it. So speculative building, but leasing up the property and making it a core holding. Most of the return in real estate comes out of your lease income. It does not come out of capital appreciation. As much as people focus on that, I think that will be true. And you're right, the dynamics of the typical downtown office building are going to change. This is the first time in my 40-year career I've been able to work from home. You know what? I like it. And I know my staff, 80-90% of my staff likes it. So I think we're still going to have to come back to the office.
They're all at your home.
To interact. Yeah. It is amazing, but there's less interaction. There's less dropping in people's office and sharing ideas. We need that interaction, that creativity and the culture. There's no culture when you're working from a Zoom screen. So, but I think we're going to see a new dynamic where, yes, a lot of people, at least a few days a week, maybe a week a month, work from home. Certainly the young families love it because then they can be with their kids. But I can tell you that people with teenagers are happy to get back to the office. They want to get out of the house. So it's a split. But the other part of real estate, apartments, industrial, all of those wonderful Amazon fulfillment centers, those are still very profitable. There are subsegments in real estate such as the server centers where the internet has to be kind of housed or hubbed. Those are profitable. So, I think I've always liked industrial because it's just big and bold and not a lot of landscape, so you don't have to water it. As long as the trucks pull up, you're making money. Retail is going to be challenged, obviously, but people do want to go back to the mall. But in retail, we've been underweight, and we have been in grocery-anchored kind of local chains and centers for a long time.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for joining us. We always appreciate hearing your broad perspective. Chris Ailman, Chief Investment Officer for the California State Teachers Retirement System. They got a couple dollars under management, about $239 billion based in Sacramento, putting that money to work for all the good teachers from the state of California. We have a risk-off day today starting the week. We'll have to see how the market plays out, but right now the S&P is off about just under 1%, 28.95 points, 30.12 on the S&P. This is Bloomberg.
Business is like a puzzle.
Can you make a call? If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
If you have to drive, then it's more important than ever to watch your speed. As London starts to reopen, there are going to be more people on our streets. There'll be more people cycling, more people walking to work or to the shops. If you must drive, avoid the morning and evening peaks when the roads will be busier. We want the streets to be safe for everyone, all the time. So watch your speed. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Uncle Ben's rice, 250 grams for just £1. And our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets, only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
Newlywed to newborn. Ordering out to tucking in. Dream car to driveway. Isn't it nice when things arrive quicker than expected? Enter your location into our digital new car locator and it instantly tells you if the BMW you want is available nearby. So it'll be with you quicker than you might think. Search BMW New Car Locator today.
Now more than ever, the world needs people with purpose. Like the people at Active Impact, who create inclusive opportunities to help disabled young people grow in confidence and learn new skills. At the Cooperative Bank, we also want to see a world that works for everyone. As the original ethical bank, we're supporting 55 of our customers' local projects just like this, with our customer donation fund. The Cooperative Bank and Active Impact. Together, we are people with purpose.
World 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
Will technology lead us out of this crisis?
We don't know how many companies can accept people back on their roster.
The Fed seems to have really flexed its muscles.
There's still a coronavirus risk.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
To wring out that buy the dip mentality, that takes time.
Are we looking at a more damaging break in the labor market? Does the shape of the yield curve matter? We're looking at late 2021, early 2022, where it really feels quote-unquote normal.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, we have a big hour coming up for you. We're going to be speaking with Leland Miller, CEO of the China Beige Book International, talk about data coming out of China that could be quite concerning. He conducts his own surveys, of course. We'll ask him if they match up. First, though, let's get to Dave Wilson, and before him, we're going to get a business flash from Greg Jarrett.
Here for you, Vonnie. The benchmark S&P dropped as much as 2.5% before cutting that decline in half. Energy, financial, and industrial stocks led the losses. Investors are seeking the safety of havens, pushing the yield on 10-year treasuries down by 3 basis points. Oil futures slumped to around $35 a barrel in New York as BP warned the pandemic will hurt long-term energy demand. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P is down 1.1%, down 34. The Dow's down 1.5%, down 370. And the NASDAQ is down 0.6%, down 57. The 10-year is up 7/32 with a yield of 0.68%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down almost 2% at $35.55 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.8% at $17.2390 an ounce. The dollar yen, 107.41. The euro is $1.1273. The British pound, $1.2562. We're listening to Dennis Gartman, the economist and former publisher of the Gartman Letter, who tells Bloomberg the government needs to find stimulus that will work and maybe even keep on working, he says.
This is one of those times when being a fiscal conservative, I think, would be ill-advised. Right now, you have to throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. Yes, there were problems with the previous legislation because it came out so fast. And yes, indeed, there are people who make more money now than they were when they were employed. That's got to be fixed. But to do away with that sort of legislation completely and to say let's let the economy do what it wants to do on its own, I think at this point it would be an ill-advised decision on the part of the government.
A little bit of escapism and optimism as far as tourism is concerned. Cancun is reopening, one of the more expensive resorts, all-inclusive there. I won't mention their name. Is charging 50% off 7 days at their most expensive suite, 2 people for $2,300. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. And now Bloomberg Markets continues with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
Greg Jarrett, I think you need to book that right away. Exactly. Greg Jarrett going down to Cancun. I think that's going to be a good thing. Greg Jarrett, thanks so much for that. Right now, we're looking at the markets here, selling off here. Let's get a sense of where action is with the small cap stocks. For that, we go to Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at in small cap?
Well, one thing I'm looking at is you're seeing smaller declines in smaller companies in today's trading. The Russell 2000 index down about 0.6%, and the S&P 500 lower by almost 1% at the moment. That said, the Russell's steepest drop belongs to Hertz Global Holdings, whose ticker is HTG. HTZ as in zebra, that is. The bankrupt rental car company has lost 18.5% after agreeing to sell as much as $500 million of stock, which, as Hertz discloses, may prove to be worthless. CAI International, ticker CAI, is down about 15.5%. The container leasing company decided against selling itself, and CEO Victor Garcia resigned. Extraction Oil and Gas, ticker XOG, has fallen 14.5% to about 55 cents a share. The shale producer filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And the Russell's biggest gain belongs to iRobot. At least one of them does. iRobot, the ticker IRBT, it's up 14%. This is the company that makes the vacuum cleaner Roomba. iRobot now sees second quarter revenue rising as much as 40% from the first quarter. The company had foreseen a quarter-to-quarter decline in sales. And GNC Holdings, ticker GNC, is up about 12%. The seller of nutritional supplements has managed to reach a deal with creditors to extend deadlines on its debt.
Won't be the first and it won't be the last. Dave, thank you. Tough times ahead for some small businesses. Dave Wilson there, N.I. Wilson on your Bloomberg. All right, let's get to our next guest now, who's going to talk to us about oil at $35.80 a barrel. So we saw oil beyond $40 a barrel, but of course for much of the last few months, oil has been in the single digits. Let's bring in Will Harris, who covers oil for us from Bloomberg Intelligence. He's European oil analyst. And so, Will, I suppose the obvious first place to go would be BP and the potential for it to cut its dividend, which interestingly happens to be the same amount of money as it pays its entire workforce. 10.6% return for the dividend equals the entire workforce's salary. So what happens, Will?
Yeah, so this morning we saw very large non-cash impairments from BP of 13 to 17 billion expected in 2Q. This is the largest impairment that we've seen in a decade since the Deepwater Horizon disaster. And this is really coming from a 30% drop in the company's internal oil price assumption. So that's come down to $55 a barrel. This is obviously owing to the COVID-19 crisis and really reflecting that the company is expecting structural changes in consumer behavior on oil demand in the future, particularly in transport fuels, that's going to materialize in a sort of post-COVID world. And it really supports our view that a dividend cut looks increasingly likely in the near term. As a reminder, BP has the most indebted balance sheet among any of the global oil majors. Leverage is going to remain very elevated in the near term. And of course, with these impairments, that gearing or leverage ratio is going to further climb.
So, Will, what's your view on their oil assumption? $55 a barrel. Is that still reasonable in a pandemic world from your perspective?
So keep in mind that this is a long-term oil price assumption. So this isn't next year or even the year beyond. So many of these companies were running north of $60 or even $70 a barrel longer term. And I think more than anything right now, BP is willing to play it safe, take the pain right off the bat with these impairments, and also start to pivot the strategy even more for the energy transition. We've seen this signaled by BP's new CEO, Bernard Looney. He earlier said, prior to this announcement this morning, that the virus would accelerate the company's energy transition plans, and even said that 2019 may have represented global peak oil demand for the world.
Now, some of its peers, like Royal Dutch Shell, did slash its payout by a third last quarter. If BP does, do we see an exit run?
Well, so there's two very different strategies at play here. Shell absolutely shocked the market. There wasn't a single analyst on the street that was expecting a dividend cut at 1Q. BP, in contrast, has taken a different route. They have very carefully sort of dropped hints. One like this morning, very heavy impairments being announced. They announced last week that they were cutting 10,000 of their employees, 15% of their workforce. Management has been very deliberate in saying that they would review the dividend as normal course approaching 2Q. So we're seeing little hints being dropped, and I think when you look at that against the backdrop of the company's finances, which is heavily indebted and very little sort of relief on the horizon for their the levels of debt. The dividend that's coming up in 2Q, it's $2.1 billion a quarter. That's the price tag, and it's just looking increasingly tenuous given we expect the operating cash flows for BP to drop by 40% this year.
Extraordinary. Will Harris, European oil analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence, on with us. We appreciate that. Will bring us some European perspective here. BP, really cutting its outlook for oil, maybe peak oil in 2019. That was kind of my takeaway there so definitely some issues for the big oil companies. Headline coming across the Bloomberg right now, Vani, very interesting. Jeff Bezos agrees to testify at the House panel about Amazon practices. That's pretty interesting to get Jeff Bezos in front of Congress. Yeah, a lawyer for Amazon sent to the House Judiciary Committee a letter yesterday apparently saying Amazon was committed to cooperating with your inquiry. So they've been investigating competition in the technology sector with a focus on the largest companies. We'll see how Amazon gets away with it. Largely unscathed so far, I would say, Paul. Yeah, exactly. And obviously their economy, their company is really dealing with the COVID-19 crisis in many, many ways. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of commentary we get from Mr. Bezos. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. to Nathan Hager for World and National Headlines. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, new coronavirus outbreaks have some states thinking about putting their reopenings on hold. Former Food and Drug Administrator Scott Gottlieb says they're happening in places like Florida, Texas, and the Carolinas that never got their numbers down the first time. And now the top health official in Tulsa, Oklahoma, is saying he wishes President Trump would put off the campaign rally he's got planned in the city this weekend. Michael Osterholm is Director of Infectious Disease Research at the University of Minnesota.
We are going to see a very substantial part of our country become infected over the next 12 to 18 months if we don't have a vaccine. We will never be blue and red again. We will be COVID colored.
Osterholm was on Fox News Sunday. White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow was on Fox News this morning. He says the spikes are relatively small bumps and they don't think it's a second wave. A new wave of protest is building in Atlanta after the police-involved killing of a black man there. 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks was shot twice in the back Friday night as he fled an arrest at a Wendy's parking lot. Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard.
There has been a systematic display that's caused harm against certain communities and certain members of those communities, African Americans and minorities.
The officer who shot Brooks has been fired. Howard says he could face a murder charge. A retired U.S. Marine has been sentenced to 16 years on spy charges in Russia. Paul Whelan was arrested in late 2018 for taking a flash drive containing state secrets at a Moscow wedding. Whelan has said he thought the drive had vacation photos and a Russian spy set him up. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Coronavirus proved that every aspect of our lives, from business to health, is connected to Asia.
Healthcare firms testing the appetite for IPOs in Hong Kong too.
But you already knew that.
COVID-19 certainly had an impact on this.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern.
What does that mean for Asia if the dollar remains on the back foot for the foreseeable future?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
The best of Bloomberg Business Week every business day.
We've got a market sell-off that's spreading around the globe.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast with Carol Nasser and Jason Kelly.
Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day, Carol.
The day's breaking global business, finance, and tech news, along with smart analysis.
We know the Fed is going to be sure and steady.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast.
A great scoop on the terminal.
Listen today on BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You aced vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesmaned the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
COVID-19.
We're Cadent. Keeping you and our people safe is our main focus, and our vital work must continue. You'll start to see more of us in your area as we increase our work to upgrade the gas pipes to keep the energy flowing into your homes and businesses. We may need to come into your home to complete this work, but rest assured our engineers are following all government guidance on PPE and social distancing. We continue to provide the critical gas emergency service, and if you smell gas, call 0800 111 999. To all other key workers, we would like to say a big thank you from everyone at Cadent. Cadent, your gas network.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
If you can build that flat pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
We're all having to get used to the new normal. And at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed, retrieve data fast. Scalability, grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity, easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen. You can do your bit by working from home if you can. Avoid public transport and walk or cycle to work or school wherever possible. We're increasing the number of buses, trains and tubes we run, but they may still be busy during peak hours. If you must use public transport, avoid early mornings between 5:45 and 8:15 and evenings between 4 and 5:30. This will help those who must travel at this time to do so safely. Search TfL Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are down, treasuries are up, all on signs a second wave of the pandemic is heading your way. The dollar is mixed against most other major currencies. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is now down 0.9%, coming off earlier lows, down 26. The Dow is down 1.25%, down 320. The Nasdaq is down 0.4%, down 34. The 10-year is up 5/30 seconds, the yield 0.68%. The West Texas Intermediate crude is down 1.5% at 35.72 a barrel, while COMEX gold's down 0.6% at 720 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.42. The euro $1.12.66, and the British pound $1.25.57. Amazon.com has told congressional investigators examining the market power of the largest tech companies that it would make Chief Executive Officer Jeff Bezos available to testify this summer. A lawyer for the e-commerce company sent the House Judiciary Committee a letter yesterday saying Amazon is committed to cooperating with your inquiry and will make the appropriate executive available to testify. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth number one in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. Well, the news coming out of China over the last, let's say 4 or 5 weeks has been one of a gradual reopening of the country after they went into a very, very sharp lockdown several months ago. But now we're hearing news that some of those openings are going to be closing again, some of the cities, including Beijing. And the real question is, what does that mean, obviously, for the people of China, but also for the economy of China and what that means for the global economy? For that, there's nobody better to talk to when we're talking China than Leland Miller, CEO of the China Beige Book International. Leland, thanks so much for joining us here. It appears that China is having some issues with its reopening. What's the latest as you look at the data that the folks at China Beige Book look at so closely?
Well, Beijing is obviously having some new problems with coronavirus, and they're taking it very seriously. You know, I think there was 50 or so infections tracked over the weekend, which has led the Chinese, in a break from the way other people are handling it, to just shut down everything. So you see markets shut down, you see an enormous tracing operation begin. So they're trying to nip this in the bud, hoping it's just a small, micro blip in what is otherwise a pretty impressive coronavirus recovery. So we don't know how that's going to affect the data going forward. It will not affect it unless this thing catches on. But I think that the overall movement here continues to be very gradual recovery. People will grapple on to some big ticket items showing some big month-on-month or quarter-on-quarter growth, and that's great. But if you look at the macro data, you're just seeing a very incremental recovery, and you're going to continue to see that so long as the global economy is mostly shut down, and possibly even beyond it because of the problems inherent in supply chains right now.
Leland, China had been trying to turn itself into more of a consumer economy. How much is that effort being set back now?
Well, it's being set back quite considerably. I mean, the talking points have always been moving from, investment to consumption, and we're going to empower the Chinese consumer. There's 1.4 billion people. How can we not have all them spend? It's going to be this great, beautiful, economic miracle. But look, the problem here is that the Chinese system has always been based around funding the supply side, funding production. And that's what you're seeing right now in this recovery. You're seeing output get back up to levels that are at least approaching normal, but you're not seeing the consumption side follow suit. So you're seeing supply return, you're not seeing demand, and then of course that's going to be putting quite considerable deflationary pressure on the economy as a whole. So the consumption economy, we're rooting for it to improve, and we're hoping the coronavirus goes away and then people snap back to the way they were. But I think that's very unrealistic at this point.
So, Leland, I remember the early days in China of the coronavirus. There was kind of an odd dynamic of people had left some of the big cities, gone back to maybe some of their hometowns, their villages outside of the cities. Have the workers, by and large, come back to the cities, come back to the factories? What's the factory output telling you?
Well, output is getting back. There is definitely more of a recovery on the production side. We are seeing workers back firms are basically up and running, up to almost pre-COVID levels of being open, at least right now. But the problem is that when you look at employment, you have this enormous floating class of migrant workers, and they're not typically reported. They're not reported in any official data. And even in data like ours, it's sometimes hard to track exactly when they're being furloughed or laid off or being rehired. And so right now we're seeing some positive movement towards firms rehiring. But there's this enormous floating class of migrants where you don't really know whether they're being retained but not paid. Are they being laid off but no one's reported it yet? There's a lot of ambiguity and a total hole in official data. So this is something we're going to have to work forward through over the next several months and try to get a better picture of, because it's just not being reported by any government data.
What's replacing demand from outside China? Presumably there's been a dent in that as other countries, particularly the United States, went on quarantine and lockdown.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're seeing a bounce back in domestic orders because people are getting back up to living their lives. It's not normal again, but in the early days of the coronavirus, domestic orders fell off a cliff. Export orders were strong, but Chinese companies and factories couldn't meet those orders because they were shut down. Now you're seeing export orders fall off a cliff. There's very little external demand, while domestic orders sort of tick back up into positive territory. So you're not seeing Armageddon. You're seeing movement, positive movement, but it's very little. And until you synchronize the export situation and the domestic situation, you're going to have a very tepid recovery. And I think that's what we've been seeing in our data and continue to expect going forward.
Hey, Leland, just real quick, 30 seconds. What's the status of kind of trade with the U.S.? What's the feeling coming out of China here?
Well, it's always been Beijing's goal that if they can just adhere as much as they need to a phase one deal to keep President Trump off their back, they'll do that. They've had a very difficult time meeting the phase one deal simply because the economy's shut down. But I think they would like this phase one deal to sort of trickle on as long as possible, and they'll make some efforts to meet it in hopes that Trump doesn't cancel it. The pressure is going to all be on the U.S. side because the phase one deal can't be met. And as a result, there's going to be some very, very difficult political decisions to be made by this fall on whether you want to suspend the agreement.
And, of course, we have the election, so a lot of balls in the air as it relates to the U.S. and China. Leland Miller helping us keep track. Leland Miller is the CEO of China Beige Book International. He is our go-to voice for all things China. And just when you think things are getting better in China as it relates to the pandemic, they have a little bit of a setback there, but they are aggressively dealing with it. So hopefully they can contain that and get that economy back up and running. It's so important to the global trade. We'll have more on that coming up. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. COVID-19 cases continued to climb in a number of states over the weekend, threatening recent efforts to relax restrictions and revive businesses. That's sending stocks lower, with the Dow falling more than 250 points. BP is anticipating that the pandemic will have a long-term impact on energy demand. The oil giant will make the biggest write-down in a decade on the value of its business. The company cut its estimates for oil and gas prices in the coming decades between 20 and 30%. United Airlines is planning to raise $5 billion by borrowing against its customer loyalty program, stepping up its efforts to boost cash. The committed financing will be secured by the Mileage Plus Rewards program. And 24 Hour Fitness has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The gym chain was unable to keep up with its debt payments. 24 Hour Fitness will stay open while it works out a plan to pay its creditors and ease the debt load. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
How long? How much? How many? Financial, policy, and medical experts are working on answers 24/7.
What about public debt?
We are listening to those experts 24/7.
Is the Fed effectively widening this wealth gap with its programs?
Because you want answers too.
What's the most important, the trillions in stimulus, the economy's reopening, or the infections curve bending?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Are you interested in a
TfL has a plan to help London reopen. You can do your bit by working from home if you can. Avoid public transport and walk or cycle to work or school wherever possible. We're increasing the number of buses, trains and tubes we run, but they may still be busy during peak hours. If you must use public transport, avoid early mornings between 5:45 and 8:15 and evenings between 4 and 5:30. This will help those who must travel at this time to do so safely. Search TfL Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Uncle Ben's rice, 250 grams for just £1. And our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets, only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
Newlywed to newborn. Ordering out to tucking in. Dream car to driveway. Isn't it nice when things arrive quicker than expected? Enter your location into our digital new car locator and it instantly tells you if the BMW you want is available nearby. So it'll be with you quicker than you might think. Search BMW new car locator today.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
This shot scored, Malkin again! Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
30 for 30 is up to bat again with Long Gone Summer, the new documentary chronicling Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa's legendary race to topple the single-season home run record in 1998. Go behind the scenes with TuneIn's Long Gone Summer channel featuring podcasts like Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show, where they discuss the film with director A.J. Schnock. Plus, keep the nostalgia going with classic game replays from Cubs and Cardinals history. Search Long Gone Summer to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
As the science and medical world continues to learn more about COVID-19, we're all learning how to best live with it. Because the news is always changing, TuneIn helps you make sure you're getting the latest information on the pandemic with live streams of CNN, MSNBC, BBC, and more. Plus, evidence-driven podcasts like Coronavirus, Fact versus Fiction, and Podcast 19 for the latest stories and reports. Search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to be speaking with our Supreme Court reporter, Greg Storr, about a seminal decision coming out of the Supreme Court today. Gay workers win their job discrimination case, and also in a separate case there are also now rights for LGBT workers in the workplace. We've already heard from Tim Cook on the matter. First though, let's get to Greg Storr for Bloomberg Business Watch.
Stocks are still down, Vonnie, but why? Well, it's because concerns that the second wave of the pandemic is coming. Treasuries are up. The dollar is mixed against most other major currencies. Why don't we take a look at the number as we do about every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P is down 1%, down 30. The Dow is down 1.4%, down 352. And the NASDAQ is down 0.4%, down 36. The 10-year is up 6/32. The yield is 0.68%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 0.5% at 36.06 a barrel. COMEX gold's down 0.5% at 17.2790 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.40. The euro's $1.1264, and the British pound $1.2553. An investor group backed by Warburg Pincus and General Atlantic has agreed to take 58.com private in a deal valuing China's biggest online classifieds firm at about $8.7 billion. The private equity consortium offered to buy out the New York-listed company's independent shareholders for $56 cash per American depositary receipt. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Supreme Court has been busy here today. A divided U.S. Supreme Court ruled that federal law protects gay and transgender workers from job discrimination in a decision that gives millions of LGBT people new civil rights. To get the latest on this, we welcome Greg Stohr. He covers all things on the Supreme Court for us. Greg, so give us a sense of how important this decision is, Greg. Was it expected? What's your take?
It's hugely important. More than half the U.S. states don't cover sexual orientation and gender identity through their own anti-discrimination laws. And what that meant was, in most of the country, it was perfectly legal for an employer to fire somebody because of his or her gender identity or sexual orientation. Now that can no longer happen. And it's a ruling that came out of a pretty conservative Supreme Court.
Yeah, isn't it phenomenal, Greg? Because it's quite ironic that even though we had that massive decision a few years ago in 2015 legalizing same-sex marriage nationwide, that still people could have been fired from their jobs for the very same thing, for being gay.
Yeah, ironic is exactly the right word for it, and it's something that a lot of people did not know, but that decision involving gay marriage was a constitutional decision. This was a matter of interpreting the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That law says that you can't discriminate against somebody on the basis of sex, and the core question for the court in this case was a somewhat technical question, which is whether that word sex covers sexual orientation and gender identity, and the Supreme Court today said yes, it does.
So it's interesting, Greg. I saw the conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch and Chief Justice John Roberts joined the court's four liberals in a 6-3 majority vote. How surprising was that to see those two conservative judges vote this way?
The Chief Justice was probably more surprising. A lot of us had watched Justice Gorsuch during the arguments, which were way back in October, and he suggested that he might actually read the statute this way. So there was at least the possibility after the argument that he would join the liberals in the majority. Chief Justice Roberts did not suggest any such thing, and he had actually been in dissent in all the court's big gay rights decisions leading up to this moment. So I'm not sure I would have guessed that he would have been there. This was something that was certainly in the mix, but again, given the overall direction of the court, it's a court that has become more conservative since Donald Trump got to appoint two justices, including Gorsuch. You have to say, wow, it's quite a surprise to see this court issue this ruling.
Well, and in fact, it was actually a trio of cases they were considering. So the two gay rights cases, but also a very interesting case, a transgender rights case. It concerned a Michigan funeral home chain that fired Amy Stevens. She was preparing to start living openly as a woman. Tragically, though, she's died now, and the Supreme Court has come out with a decision just more than a month after she died.
Yes, she did. She had health problems for a while. She did get to see a federal appeals court rule in her favor, but of course, when the Supreme Court got involved, that victory for her was in jeopardy. Her name will certainly be remembered as someone who pushed this issue, who insisted that she should be treated equally, that she should not be discriminated against because she had decided to begin living openly as a woman. But yes, tragic for her that she didn't live to see this day.
It's interesting, Greg. Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, just came out applauding the Supreme Court decision here. What's the general feeling of corporate America as it relates to these types of rights, and what do you think the response will be to this ruling?
I think there'll be a lot more of what you just heard from Tim Cook. Corporate America was generally on the side of expanding LGBT rights, in part just a calculated business decision that they want to see clear rules, and now they know what the rules are. They cannot discriminate, and it's a nationwide rule. They don't have to worry about a patchwork across the country. But there's also, when you talk to a lot of corporate leaders, they talk about how important it is for them to maintain a diverse and welcoming workforce, and this is something that in their minds will certainly push us in that direction.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just more broadly on the docket and what's left for the rest of the year, and who will write the decisions, Greg? I know you've been keeping track.
Well, I wouldn't have guessed that Justice Gorsuch was going to write this decision, so I don't know who's going to write what going forward. One big one we're waiting for, we should get pretty soon, is whether President Trump can abolish the DACA deferred deportation program. That's obviously going to be very contentious. We're going to have rulings on abortion, religious rights, and then probably near the very end of the term, rulings on those subpoenas by the House and a New York grand jury for President Trump's financial information. That will no doubt be one of the most politically divisive rulings of the term.
And just on which justices are left to write decisions, at least?
Well, it could be the way it works out. I would expect Chief Justice Roberts to write some of the big ones. The whole dynamic of who writes what opinion is dependent on the sitting in which the court issues its ruling. So at this point, it's a little hard to guess. I do think Chief Justice Roberts, a very good chance he will be the one writing the DACA decision. Beyond that, it's a little hard to speculate.
All right, well, it is fascinating. We'll keep an eye on all of your stories, particularly that seminal decision today from the Supreme Court, which gives millions of LGBT people new civil rights.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I wasn't aware that many states did not have that protections at the state level. So obviously this is a compelling and exceptionally important ruling here by the Supreme Court.
And it's always the incremental decision that makes change, right? Our thanks to Greg Storr, Supreme Court reporter for Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg. Now let's head to our 991 studios in Washington to Nathan Hager for World and National Headlines.
Thanks, Vonnie. Signs of a new surge of coronavirus have some states reconsidering their reopenings. Both Texas and Florida reported record numbers of new cases yesterday. That uptick has the top public health official in Tulsa, Oklahoma, saying he wishes President Trump wouldn't hold a campaign rally in the city this weekend. Oklahoma Senator James Lankford tells ABC's This Week not all the state's numbers are going down.
Our hospitalizations continue to decline, our deaths continue to decline, and we encourage people that are high risk not to get involved in any location, whether that be a rally or other high-risk locations.
This morning, White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow told Fox News the spikes are relatively small, controllable bumps in the recovery. He says they don't think they're a second wave. The NAACP is leading a rally and march in Atlanta following the police killing of a black man in that city late Friday night. 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks was shot twice in the back after a struggle with officers caught on body cam video. Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney Paul Howard has a message for the demonstrators.
We hear you, we're listening, and we believe that the justice system ought to have one standard and not two.
The officer who shot Brooks has been fired. Atlanta's police chief resigned hours after the shooting. Amazon says its CEO, Jeff Bezos, will be made available to testify on Capitol Hill this summer. The world's richest man had been in a standoff with Democrat David Cicilline, who's been leading an investigation into competition in the technology sector. In a letter to the House Judiciary Committee, an Amazon lawyer said the company is committed to cooperating and will make Bezos available at a hearing with other CEOs. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
With COVID-19 so much...
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda. The power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed. Retrieve data fast. Scalability. Grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity. Easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen. You can do your bit by working from home if you can. Avoid public transport and walk or cycle to work or school wherever possible. We're increasing the number of buses, trains and tubes we run, but they may still be busy during peak hours. If you must use public transport, avoid early mornings between 5:45 and 8:15 and evenings between 4 and 5:30. This will help those who must travel at this time to do so safely. Search TfL Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Airbags to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Now more than ever, the world needs people with purpose. The frontline saviours and the backroom heroes. People supporting our communities and making sure no one gets left behind. As the original ethical bank, we've always believed in the power of we. And today, our customer donation fund is supporting 55 of our customers' local projects to continue their amazing work in communities across the UK. The Cooperative Bank. For people with purpose.
The wait is over. This Wednesday, it's Aston Villa v Sheffield United and Man City v Arsenal in a fantastic restart for the season. And with Now TV, you can watch both games live for just $9.99. Hold on, they're checking with VAR.
That's confirmed, it's $9.99.
Game changer. So, grab a Now TV Sky Sports Day Pass. Search Now TV Sports. 18 plus content streamed via internet. Full terms apply.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Sponsored by Witham, a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients to be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting Witham.com. Now, earlier, the S&P was down as much as 2.5%, but now it's down less than 1%. Energy, financial, and industrial stocks are leading the losses. Investors are seeking the safety of havens, pushing the yield on 10 years down by 2 basis points. Oil futures have slumped to around $35 a barrel in New York as BP warned the pandemic will hurt long-term energy demand. Let's take a look at the numbers. Right now, the S&P is down just 1%, down 31. The Dow is down 1.4%, down 366. And the NASDAQ is down 0.3%, down 33. The 10-year is up 7/30 seconds. The yield 0.76. Excuse me. You take a closer look at it. The yield is 0.67%. I'll reverse the numbers there. West Texas Intermediate's down 0.7%, down 36 even. COMEX Gold's down 0.7%, 17.25.90 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.37. The euro $1.12.62, and the British pound $1.25.40. Again, West Texas Intermediate is now priced at $36.01 a barrel. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
So rates for what's being called directors and officers insurance, they've skyrocketed because there's been a surge in lawsuits by plaintiffs seeking to sue as a group. Now, the latest surge in lawsuits coming as a response to the coronavirus outbreak and how companies may have bungled it in certain cases, according to these plaintiffs. But interestingly, Elon Musk, never one to shy away from making a gesture, said in April he was dropping the insurance policy that protects Tesla's board from shareholder lawsuits. It doesn't mean they wouldn't be insured. It meant that he would pay out of his own pocket. It's a fantastic story today brought to us by Jeff Feely and Catherine Chiglinski of Bloomberg News. And let's bring them in now. Jeff, why would Elon Musk have put himself on the line like this? Not that he doesn't have enough money, but I mean, these are potentially multi-million, even more lawsuits.
Elon is Elon, is what I want to say to start off. Also, I mean, you're talking about an average 44% increase over the last 2 years of this kind of insurance. It's starting to get a bit out of hand, and the insurance companies are citing a jump in the numbers of security suits, and then, of course, the COVID thing, both of which are legitimate reasons. But I mean, 44% in a 2-year period. That's a pretty big bump. And, you know, I mean, companies are looking to conserve resources given the economic body blows that the pandemic has caused. So Elon sees this as a way of saving money.
So, Kat, I want to bring you in here. You cover all things on the insurance side. On this D&O or directors and officers insurance market here, what does it typically cover? What kind of protections does it typically give a board member?
Yeah, so it gives them a lot of liability protection in case they're sued. It often, you know, we see it occur when some shareholder files a suit that alleges, you know, they've been hurt because of a stock drop, which kind of makes this a really interesting time period for the market because, you know, while we did see sort of the stock market crash in a bit of the first quarter, especially in March, it was a broad-based decline. So I think that's going to make a lot of these claims a little more intriguing because whether you can prove the cause, whether you were hurt by this broad market, or if it was just something that really affected a bunch of companies at once, I think is going to be kind of an interesting tension we'll see in these lawsuits.
Well, just on that particular question as well, I mean, there are some companies, for whom that's more of a problem than others, and Tesla might be one of them, considering we saw its share price go above $1,000 last week. And Elon himself has run-ins with regulators from time to time, given his ramblings on Twitter sometimes, and they can move stocks. So is he really putting himself on the line? I mean, what's the worst case scenario for Elon Musk in this scene, Catherine?
Well, I would say, obviously, if there are lawsuits and they do prove quite successful against him, he's got a lot on the line. And it becomes quite tricky in his case because there are some conflicts of interest that people have raised. The board members need to sort of make sure his wealth is there in a way to protect them. And that's where, insurance always gets kind of interesting. That's why a lot of people turn to sort of the traditional insurers to buy it, because they want, someone who's very separate from the company and the board to insure them so that there's no conflict of interest. And I think those were some of the concerns that, experts we talked to raised, is that Elon is going to have to fork over money if there is a loss. And, he has obviously got a lot of ties to Tesla and the board, and they're going to have to make sure that they can kind of keep things very independent.
Yeah, Jeff, I kind of want to follow up on that. If I were a board member at Tesla, I'm not sure. I'm sure I'm drinking the Elon Musk Kool-Aid, but I'm not sure I'd be comfortable not having that D&O insurance policy behind me. What's the sense of other companies out there? I mean, this is really unusual, isn't it?
It is. And given what Elon Musk thinks about most journalists, I would not sit by the phone waiting for that call for your board appointment. But the reality is that nobody else that we were able to find has done this. We poked around. J&J may have. They wouldn't comment on it. They have their own captive insurer. But here's the reality. We quote Skip McBride, who's a director at companies such as Bluebell Ice Cream in Texas. He's an old D&O expert, Martin from Marklinear now. And we quote him as saying he would not join the Tesla board without cutting his own separate deal with Elon Musk that he would write that would leave him no wiggle room on covering litigation against Skip McBride. They may have done that. That may be the way that they have handled that. They did not disclose that, by the way, in their SEC filings. What they did disclose is that Elon's board had basically chewed over the idea of whether this left them in a conflict position, and they found that it did not. So, this is all one big goulash that you've got sort of swirling around involving COVID. You have the insurance industry saying that they face potential losses of $480 billion, that's with a B, every month over insurance claims, business interruption, other insurance claims, D&O, $480 billion a month.
It's really phenomenal, but I suppose, if the prices have gone up that much, then I guess you do get to that number pretty quickly. What's the outlook for these coronavirus cases, Jeff? There's going to be so many of them.
Oh, yeah, here's the deal. And you guys mentioned Tesla as being somebody who's at particular risk. I don't see them at particular risk. We note in the story is at particular risk is Norwegian Cruise Line and Princess Cruise Line, and those guys have already got at least a half dozen security suits against them, saying not only did you bungle COVID, but in the example of Norwegian, you basically lied to people about how bad COVID was to try to get them to keep their booking dates on the cruises. That goes before a jury, and I don't even want to think of a number that gets attached in the verdict.
Jeff Feely, thanks so much for joining us. Jeff Feely is a legal reporter for Bloomberg News. And Kat Chidlinsky, finance reporter covering all things insurance for Bloomberg News as well, with a fascinating story the two had out today. Elon Musk effectively self-insuring his board. I just can't think of another example of that, Vonnie.
If you were counting on your CEO to insure you, Paul, would you argue with him?
No, I don't think so. I just think the risk, particularly in this environment, are just too great, and I think it's really too much really to ask for a board member. I think in this environment.
Yeah, exactly. Captive insurance trickier with D&O because of conflicts of interest, as we say in the story. It's definitely well worth reading the whole story.
Absolutely great stuff coming out of Bloomberg
But
News.
no matter what he does,
that's
those
what
share
he does.
prices go higher.
It's Elon being Elon. Coming up, Balance of Power with David Weston. He will drive the conversation forward with a view from Washington and all things on the power side. For Vonnie Quinn, I'm Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. At the start of every day,
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda. The power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen. You can do your bit by working from home if you can. Avoid public transport and walk or cycle to work or school wherever possible. We're increasing the number of buses, trains and tubes we run, but they may still be busy during peak hours. If you must use public transport, avoid early mornings between 5:45 and 8:15 and evenings between 4 and 5:30. This will help those who must travel at this time to do so safely. Search TfL Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Airbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, this is Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. We start, as every day we start, with the markets. And Scarlett Fu, I'm delighted to say, is joining us today to take us through the markets. So markets, they're down, Scarlett, but not as bad as they were at one point.
Yeah, we certainly opened lower because there's a lot of carryover of weakness from Europe and Asia. There's a concern over a second wave of infections. We've seen cases increase in Florida, Texas, California, as well as Arizona. And, of course, a new outbreak in Beijing at a time when data out of that country shows, yes, things are improving, but probably not to the extent that we're going to get a V-shaped recovery that will get to what we saw before the crisis. Now, Gina Martin-Adams of Bloomberg Intelligence says we've entered this new equity market regime where any index move higher now gets rockier, so more volatility. Future bursts of strength are dependent on economic and earnings green shoots, and leadership is shifting defensively. And you see that right here with the NASDAQ 100 doing better than the Dow Industrials. Big tech is once again seen as a haven and growth play because they continue to see demand for their products and services and have the balance sheet to ride out this disruption. Of course, havens are in favor. You can see the 10-year yield move south again to 68 basis points, and the dollar edges higher for a fourth day in 5. As you mentioned, David, indexes are steadily coming off their lows. There's still a lot of trading day to go, but buy the dip that has worked so well in the rally since March 23rd seems to be a little bit in effect here.
Another narrative we've been seeing actually is sort of a divergence between Main Street and Wall Street going on. How important is potentially more fiscal stimulus from Congress? When are we going to see something that might help Main Street along?
Well, that's going to be critical this week, especially with Jay Powell speaking to Congress, starting with the Senate tomorrow and, of course, to the House Financial Services Committee on Wednesday. That's going to be a big issue, especially since you see data like Empire Manufacturing today come in better than expected. We also get retail sales as well as industrial production on Tuesday. Housing starts on Wednesday, and housing has been doing very well in this economy as certainly mortgage rates have come down, and a lot of people are looking to reconfigure where they're living to adjust for the changes that we've seen in the economy overall. By and large, data has been surprising to the upside. So if you look at an economic surprise index, it's been going up, up, and up. The trick there, though, or the tricky thing there, though, is that it's not going to last. It's a self-correcting mechanism because as data gets better, because the economy reopens, economists start to move up their estimates. They get more optimistic. And as they continue to move up their estimates, at some point, the data is going to start disappointing and you'll get a self-correcting mechanism in place there. And we'll start to see that rollover in economic surprises. And maybe that'll be reflected in equity markets. David?
Terrific. It's really great to have you with us, Scarlett. Thank you so much for that report on the markets. Part of what happened today was we got some China numbers out, and they indicated that maybe China's on the way to recovery, but they also indicated how long that's going to take and how difficult it may be. Anna Ashton now joins us from the U.S.-China Business Council, where she is Senior Director for Global Affairs. So, Anna, welcome back. Great to have you here. What did you read out of those numbers? I mean, we were up actually in industrial production, but not as much as expected. We were down in retail sales more than we thought.
Right. I mean, I think, it is true that China's not likely to stage some earth-shattering recovery this year. The numbers are bearing that out. But at the same time, Chinese factories are up and running. There's been a year-on-year increase in value-added industrial production. And while the retail and investment numbers are lower than they were this time last year, we are seeing that Chinese consumers are beginning to spend more money than they were earlier in the year. And the reality is that China is the only major world economy that the World Bank says is likely to post positive growth in 2020. So, it's going to be an important engine of global GDP growth just by virtue of that fact.
Yeah, so we are also getting reports now of new cases popping up, particularly in Beijing, and a lot of concern over in Beijing. What effect might that have on the Chinese consumer?
I guess it remains to be seen exactly how Beijing ultimately weathers a second wave, just as it remains to be seen how we will weather a second wave, which it seems like is increasingly inevitable. But, they have to date shown a strong ability to lock things down as swiftly as possible and as efficiently as possible and then open up faster than we have been able to. So I would expect that maybe it will decrease the prospects of positive growth, but it will probably not change the fact that China is set to come out of this better than most countries.
Anna, give us a sense of the members for your organization, U.S.-China Business Council, and their appetite for continuing to do business at the same big rate that they had been in China. Are they starting to lose some of that appetite given, number one, the trade disputes, but now the pandemic?
It's a little bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, no, because there are a significant portion of our members are in China for the China market. Their operations are there in order to serve the Chinese market, and the Chinese market is enormous. It's only getting bigger. They need to be in China and serving that market successfully in order to be globally competitive. So those companies, I don't think have lost any appetite for the China market. They're just weathering a bad quarter or two. As the COVID-19 outbreak and its effects on the economy there play out. Certainly, the politics in the U.S.-China relationship have been a huge strain on our companies for the last few years, basically since the beginning of the Trump administration. In our annual member surveys, members have listed the political relationship, the bilateral relationship, as the number one concern they have when it comes to their business interests in China, and that's extremely unusual. Before the Trump administration, that was never even in the top 10. That remains a very significant concern for members, and not just because of the administration, but also because Congress, on both sides of the aisle, has been rolling out bill after bill after bill that is focused on China in relatively punitive ways, or sometimes very punitive ways, that are likely to really negatively impact the business relationship. So there is some concern about what the long-term prospects for this bilateral business relationship are.
And even as President Trump says some fairly confrontational things about China, he still says he has hopes for that phase one. Remember that back before the pandemic, that phase one deal with China. Do your members share that hope, or have they given up on that?
Our members absolutely share that hope. From their perspective, this is an incredibly important deal. No, it didn't deliver everything that U.S. companies hoped it would deliver, but it certainly brought the U.S. and China back to a bit more normalized negotiation, and it did make some important progress on a variety of fronts, not just the purchase agreements, but also various ag regulations, as well as IP and tech transfer, and financial services. So our members really want to it's very important to them that the deal successfully be implemented. We also have heard from USTR, as well as from other parts of the U.S. government and the Chinese government, that there is no phase two negotiation, which will get to the meatier issues the business is concerned about, until there is a successful implementation of phase one. So monitoring phase one implementation, making sure that the government continues to pay attention to the phase one deal is very, very important to our members. And so far, we've heard from both governments that things are coming along well. Granted, the purchase agreement, the reporting is mixed on that. There's some concern that China is not going to be able to meet its commitments this year. But, the reality is that China has been stepping up its purchases in the agricultural space all year long, and has bought far more than it bought by this time last year, and it's not even seasonally the right time for them to be buying these things. So it's clear that China is trying.
Right. Anna, thank you so much for joining us. Anna Ashton of the U.S.-China Business Council. Coming up here, we're going to talk with the head of one of the largest and most prestigious hospitals in the country, Dr. Steve Corwin of New York Presbyterian, for a report on the coronavirus. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
It's the people with experience who...
Listen. That's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed. Retrieve data fast. Scalability. Grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity. Easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
Get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Thanks to National Lottery players, South Denbighshire Community Partnership are now delivering hot meals to elderly people in the community like Bob and Sarah.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Can my employer change my contract?
Am I entitled to statutory sick pay?
What is holiday pay?
When can I take annual leave?
Is my employer allowed to change the hours I work?
How do I raise an issue with my employer?
Right now, it's important to know your rights in the workplace. At ACAS, we're here to help with free impartial advice. Visit us today at acas.org.uk/rights at work.
At Asda, we're helping you shop safely by keeping our stores clean and limiting customer numbers so you can keep 2 meters apart. With our Scan and Go mobile app, you can reduce contact at the till too. Asda, we're all in this together. Subject to availability, mobile data charges may apply.
Hi, I'm an ad for Voxy, the mobile network that gives you endless social media without eating your data. Plus, there's no contract, so you can cancel any time. Get endless social media plus a whopping 12 gig for just £10 a month. What? Don't just sit there twiddling your thumbs. Get your SIM today at voxy.co.uk. Voxy. Stay connected, stay endless. Offer ends 25th of June. Endless social requires 30 days rolling plan, some general data, and does not include voice and video calls. 25 gigabytes roaming, fair use and terms apply.
Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB? On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Brayton and Jared Carrabis cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
Who says only the experts get to do the talking? On the Scuttlepuck NHL Hockey Podcast, irreverent outsiders Mike Bond and Dale Horde give their untrained opinions on all things hockey from the fans' perspective.
I don't know how you get those guys out of there. And Crosby, as great as he's been, it's just such a different era, so it's tough with the... he didn't have the crazy number of points that Orr, Lemieux, and Gretzky did.
Search Scuttlepuck on TuneIn to listen.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Rate of increase of coronavirus in New York is the lowest it's been in months. And we're going to go now to somebody who's been fighting on the front lines to ensure that result. He is Dr. Steve Corwin. He is the president and CEO of the New York Presbyterian Hospital System. So, Dr. Corwin, thank you so very much for being with us. As I say, you really are really on the front lines. Give us how it looks from where you are, where you're fighting the battle. How does it look in New York right now?
Oh, much better, David. No question about the fact that at our peak, we were at about 2,700 cases throughout my hospital system. That represented about 80% of our capacity. We're down to less than 350 cases now in our institutions, and much less in terms of ICU care. So we clearly have been on the downward trend, and thankfully that's continued and taken off some of the pressure on our system.
So the next stage has to be, how worried are we about an uptick? We're seeing it in some of the states, not big numbers, but the rate is disturbing. We also now see it in Beijing as well. How concerned are you that here in New York we could have an uptick?
Well, I'm concerned across the country that we're going to have an uptick. You're now seeing some hotspots potentially in Houston, Phoenix, parts of Florida. You can't let this get out of control, because then contact tracing goes out the window, and that's when you really put pressure on the hospital system as a whole. I'm concerned about people becoming weary about social distancing. Even with the opening up, one can still maintain social distancing. I think people are weary of that, and therefore we need to be wary of an uptick in infections and follow that closely. In the other areas of the country, you need to follow not just the increase in infections, because if you test more, you're going to find more people have it, but what's the hospitalization rate? And that's where I get concerned in speaking to colleagues in Houston and Phoenix, David.
And so are we better prepared for an uptick at this point from things we've learned about the virus and how to treat it? And for that matter, on some of the equipment issues like ventilators and personal protective equipment, are we better prepared?
No question about it. No question about it. We're better prepared. We could deal with the second wave more effectively, both from the standpoint of state and city government, as well as how hospitals need to prepare for it. We know how to surge. We've changed the way that we look at how much protective equipment we need, how many ventilators we need, how much ICU capacity we need. So I think we're better prepared for it, but let's just remember, we still are only talking about supportive therapy. We don't have an effective therapy. We don't have an effective vaccine. And so keeping the transmission rate less than 1 is how you don't overwhelm the economy or the hospital system.
And as a practical matter, what is the likelihood of an effective treatment or a vaccine? There's a lot of talk about it, even by the end of the year. It's impossible to know for sure, but what do you think about the prospects?
You know, we should all be rooting for it. There's no question about it. I think it's more likely that we will start to see effective combination therapies before the end of the year than we will see an effective vaccine. But we hope for both. If past this prelude, the earliest development of a vaccine took about 4 years, and that's the mumps vaccine. So I would be dubious to think that we could get mass inoculations in 20 or 21. I think the first set will be people on the front lines volunteering for vaccination. Then you have to determine whether it's efficacious over a period of time. And whether it causes side effects. There are some vaccines that can actually worsen the disease. So we still have a long road to go. But in terms of the amount of effort put into it, let's root for our biotech and big pharma firms to come up with something, because this is a very, very serious disease and with a high mortality associated with it if you need to be hospitalized. No question about that.
Dr. Corbin, when we talk about the tools we have to use, we've talked before there was a pandemic, about the role of technology. What role is telemedicine playing, and it can play a larger role going forward as we have problems?
Well, we've crossed the Rubicon on telemedicine. Before the pandemic, about 3% of our visits were telemedicine visits. Post-pandemic, we're at about 40 to 45% of our office visits are telemedicine visits. During the pandemic, it was almost universal that the only way we would see patients was with telemedicine. So I think that's here to stay. As technology improves, as remote patient monitoring improves, we'll be able to do more with telemedicine. It will become part of the way that physicians and nurse practitioners and others see patients. And I think we can do a better job with that. So this is just an acceleration of the trend, and I think there's no turning back on that at this point. So telemedicine is here to stay, no question about it.
And finally, Dr. Corbin, I have to ask about your colleagues. I mean, they've been through really a war with all the consequences of that. How are they doing? What are you trying to do for people who have been exhausted, have seen things that no one should have to see?
Well, we've put a lot of mental health and well-being supports in place. A lot of anonymous consultative services from our psychiatrists are in place. But the first thing for healthcare workers is to not think that you can just tough it out, because that's the way that we train people. You can get through this. You can tough it out. This has been horrific. I worry very much about people having to go through a second wave of this. So we're offering all sorts of emotional support services for all of our workers, really. We had a tragic suicide of a leader of one of our emergency departments who went home to Charlottesville on leave to try to recover from an episode of depression. So this can affect people acutely. And more importantly, people have to recognize it can affect people after the fact, once the pandemic has passed. So we're very concerned right now about the emotional health and well-being of all of our employees. And I would urge us to keep in mind that as we go through this pandemic with frontline healthcare workers, they really have put their lives on the line.
Yeah, and we owe all of you. I think everybody in the New York area really realizes how much we owe you. Thank you so much, Stephen. That's Dr. Stephen Corwin. He is the president and CEO of New York Presbyterian Hospital System. Coming up here, there's more in the saga of Carlos Ghosn as an exclusive Bloomberg report uncovers some more evidence about what may have led to it. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
You may not be getting on planes yet.
At what point do we start to see this elusive V-shaped recovery?
But for detailed, up-to-the-minute news of Asia, you don't have to.
Do you think that the tension has the possibility to destabilize Asian assets?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do you expect some of these companies that come and list here to then delist in New York?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Well, from the very beginning, Carlos Ghosn has insisted that the reason he got arrested over in Tokyo is because people didn't want him moving Renault and Nissan closer together. And now there's some new evidence to suggest he may be right about that. We welcome now Brian Bremner. He is our executive editor for Global Business with Bloomberg, and he has the story. Brian, explain to us what we uncovered at Bloomberg and revealed that sort of would tend to confirm Carlos Ghosn's side of this story.
Well, as you know, this has been kind of a multi-act drama, really since late last year when Carlos Ghosn kind of fled Japan ahead of a trial, went to Lebanon, and he made the case when he could talk publicly and freely that he was set up by a group of executives in Nissan who objected to his plans to intensify an existing alliance between Nissan and Renault. And as you may recall, there were some financial charges leveled by Tokyo prosecutors that he was facing. He always said that wasn't the issue. The real issue here was that there was this plot against me by a group of very powerful players inside Nissan. So what we've found is some evidence to suggest that there's something to Ghosn's claim. And the reason we say that is we've had access to emails, to other documents, to strategic memos, and we also were able to substantiate that with other people who were players and had kind of direct knowledge of the events that have transpired. And what they show collectively is that roughly 9 months before Ghosn was ever arrested, on that fateful day back in November of 2018, there was a running conversation about this guy had to go. That his efforts to intensify the merger were terrible for Nissan, and that by removing Ghosn, there was an opportunity to to redo the alliance on terms much more favorable to Nissan.
Yeah, Brian, at the same time, I suppose it's possible that both sides are right. That is to say that, yeah, there was sort of a plot to get rid of Carlos Ghosn, but at the same time, Carlos Ghosn may have done something wrong at the same time. The one doesn't necessarily exclude the other.
That's right. That's right. And this, just to be clear, this story does not litigate the financial indictments against Mr. Ghosn. I mean, the only way that we're going to get a final say on that would be in a trial setting in Tokyo, which is now highly unlikely because Mr. Ghosn left, and Lebanon and Japan don't have any kind of extradition treaty. So those issues are still out there. But I think what's new is that Nissan always insisted this was always about these alleged financial improprieties and nothing else. And they said that consistently for roughly a year. They told their shareholders that. They told the public that. And it doesn't look like that was the whole story. And at the same time, Nissan's stock is about 50% lower than it was when Ghosn's arrested. And one could argue that Renault's efforts to kind of create a bigger merger with Fiat never were able to go to fruition.
It's quite a story, as you say. Thank you so much to Brian Bremner, our colleague in London. And this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are falling on reports of a spike in COVID-19 cases. Investors worry about what a second coronavirus wave would mean to the economy's rebound. The Dow is falling 280 points, NASDAQ dropping 17, S&P down 22 points. United Airlines is planning to raise $5 billion by borrowing against its frequent flyer program to step up efforts to boost liquidity amid the COVID-19 pandemic. A big chunk of jobs lost during the pandemic shutdowns may never come back as some companies go under. Analysts at Bloomberg Economics expect 30% of the jobs lost from February through May will not come back. And 24-Hour Fitness has filed for bankruptcy. The chain has been unable to keep up with debt payments after the coronavirus shutdowns. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Oculomotor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's time now for First Word News, and we turn to Mark Crumpton.
David, the Food and Drug Administration is no longer approving the use of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine to treat COVID-19. The FDA has revoked emergency use authorization for the drugs, saying they are unlikely to work against the virus and could have dangerous side effects. President Trump had touted the two anti-malaria drugs as a treatment for the virus and said he had been taking them as a precaution. A Moscow court found former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan guilty of spying and sentenced him to 16 years in prison. That's according to his family. Whelan says he's innocent and was set up by a Russian security officer who owed him money. Moscow says he was caught with computer flash drives containing classified information. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has stepped back into the Brexit fray. He began talks today with the European Union's top officials, with both sides looking to reset negotiations that have drifted into stalemate. It's the Prime Minister's first direct intervention in the discussions since the UK left the bloc at the end of January. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. Well, when Congress stepped in to try to help small businesses across the country, it discovered that one of the obstacles is a lot of the smallest businesses really don't have access to a bank the way larger corporations do. Well, the so-called Community Development Financial Institutions, or CDFIs, help try to bridge that gap. We welcome now the president of one of those. He is the CEO of Southern Bancorp. He is Darren Williams. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Williams. So you do this down in Arkansas and Mississippi, as I understand it. First of all, just explain what your institution does. What's the nature of your clients? What's the size of the typical loans you make?
So sure, first of all, David, thank you for having us. So we are a CDFI, as you explained, and as such, 60% of our activity must take place in what we call low and moderate income census tracts. So we serve the rural Arkansas, Mississippi Delta, one of the most persistently poor communities of all the United States. And so, our loans range in size. In our PPP loans that we're talking about now, the smallest we did was $200. The largest was almost $5 million. We did about 1,279 PPP loans over the course of these loans have been going on, for about $111 million that go back in the communities to help support the jobs of the businesses in the markets we serve, and which is very needed. And many of the businesses we talked to said those loans were the lifeline of their business. Several would have had to shut down but for access to the PPP dollars. In fact, I can remember a healthy clinic in Clarksville, Mississippi. This is a minority-owned health clinic that provides comprehensive health care services to all of that community. 4 full-time employees, 2 part-time employees, and they would close their doors but for those PPP loans. So those are the folks we provide access to capital and credit, and in this case, COVID relief through the PPP program.
So, Darren, you're known for the fact that you're really hands-on. I mean, you deal directly with these customers. You approve loans specifically, personally. Give us a sense, what happens when the PPP money runs out? I mean, can these people hold on? Is this going to tide them over to get them to the other side, so to speak?
Yeah, David, that's what we're real concerned about. So the PPP loan dollars had some restrictions on how those proceeds could be used. At least 60% had to be used for employees, or putting people on the payroll. And that was the crux of that program, to keep people employed and keep them working. We know because of COVID-19, because of the coronavirus, the economy is not fully recovered. People don't have the confidence to go back in the marketplace or to really enter the marketplace. And so many businesses still are seeing a significant decrease in their revenues. People have not come back. For example, our hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, hotels operating at 30-40% capacity, sometimes even less. Restaurants, because of the rules around social distancing, have to operate at less than capacity. So their revenues are shut down, and there's so many other things that folks need resources for, more than just paying employees. So if we don't regain consumer confidence, the economy doesn't open back soon, I'm afraid that we will see many of these businesses continue to suffer and may have to even lay off employees, and some, unfortunately, may not make it through. But I'm hopeful that as Congress thinks about and debates additional forms of relief and working with the administration, that we can find ways to support America's small business, particularly those that are in underserved markets, because those jobs are the backbone of those communities.
So give us a sense of unemployment down there in Arkansas and in the Mississippi Delta, as you referred to it. We heard from the president, the president of the Fed, Mr. Kaplan, who said really he's concerned about unemployment and the fact that it may keep going, may be very high by the end of the year. This is part of what he had to say. This is Mr. Kaplan.
Depending on how fast the service sector comes back and people re-engage, we're still going to have an elevated level of unemployment, maybe as high, based on my forecast, of 8% or more. And it means that some people won't be able to go back to their old jobs and will have to find new jobs.
So apply that down to your area, if you would, Mr. Williams. Are you seeing situations where you think the jobs just aren't going to come back? What kind of level of unemployment are you experiencing?
Well, unfortunately, I couldn't agree with him more. And remember, the Arkansas-Mississippi Delta is one of the most persistently poor communities of all the United States. So the unemployment numbers in our communities were already elevated. Even when the economy was flourishing, we were struggling, and we continue to struggle. That's the nature of the markets that we serve. And so I am concerned that if consumer confidence doesn't come back and people don't re-enter the marketplace, that many people will find themselves without jobs. And it wouldn't be surprising if we saw double-digit unemployment in the markets we serve. That's why we think it's so important that we provide as much relief as we can to our borrowers, and that we hope that Congress and the administration will continue to find solutions that reach the smallest of small businesses in the markets that we serve and others like ours throughout the United States.
So you mentioned particularly the plight of things like restaurateurs, people who have small restaurants down there. Give us a sense of the economy. Are people starting to come back and going to restaurants and things? How much of it is locked down still? How eager are people to get out?
Well, I can say consumer confidence is not completely back. There's kind of a mixed bag in different markets that we serve. We have 48 locations throughout Arkansas and Mississippi, and all the markets are a little different. Some of the markets in the Mississippi Delta, for example, they rely heavily on tourism, blues festivals, and other events throughout the summer that really help those economies thrive and actually make it. That's where many of the governments make their tax dollars to support the government infrastructure throughout the year. And those festivals, those programs have been canceled. And so it's going to be tough for many of these communities to make it, and many of the people that work in those communities who may find themselves unemployed. It's going to be a tough time. But we're going to do all we can. Rural America is resilient. The Delta is resilient. We're going to do all we can to ensure that we can bounce back and recover, and really not recover, but hopefully do better than we were doing before.
Are you counting on more help from Congress? That is to say, that so-called fourth tranche of fiscal stimulus?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about that, right? And so we're fortunate to be in a position where we have real access to our legislative leaders and even to the administration. So I think you had Congressman French Hill on your show recently, and he's a true advocate for us. He's a former community banker, former member of the CDFI Fund Advisory Board, so he understands the importance of CDFIs to the communities that we serve. And so we're hopeful that folks like Congressman Hill and others who understand the plight of small town America, they will provide support and assistance that's really targeted toward not just big business, but targeted toward small businesses that really are the backbone that make these economies in small town America make them thrive.
Well, on that very subject, apart from Congress, the Fed also has been trying to help. Today, they opened up their so-called Main Street lending facility. Is that something that could help people down in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so we're looking at that very closely. We've been talking to the Feds, and fortunately, I was able to participate in a recent Fed Listens session. And the Fed's did a lot of things to try to, improve that program when it was first announced. The initial lending threshold was about $1 million. They've reduced that down to about $500,000. And so, again, the loans that we do are really small loans. And these small business loans really are the backbone of those small businesses thriving. And so we don't have a lot of businesses that can access a $500,000 loan, but we're looking at those that might be able to access that type of program, and we're going to make it available, not just the Main Street Lending Program, but any program that the administration and Congress provides that will help our small business, help our communities. We're going to do all we can to support them.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so very much. That's really a thorough report on what's going on down in Arkansas and the Mississippi Delta. That's from Darren Williams. He is Southern Bancorp's CEO. There's a lot of concern, part of the concern on consumers' part, about a possible second wave. And earlier today, Joshua Sharfstein, he is Vice Dean of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, talked to Bloomberg Surveillance. I should mention that that School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, who is the founder of Bloomberg LP and also Bloomberg Philanthropies. This is what Dr. Sharfstein had to say.
Well, first they say that the virus is very persistent and, it's not that easy to get rid of. And that if you let your guard down, it will come back. And in the United States, there's no question that there are parts of the country that have let their guard down somewhat. That's not just that they've opened, but that people have sort of mentally moved past, I think, the rigor that they need to follow in order to prevent infection. And the delay to see a rise is probably more like 6 weeks than 2 weeks. And so 6 weeks after the opening, we're starting to see surges in a number of states.
Joshua, when you look at the difference between Beijing and the U.S., what's happening in Beijing? We understand there that actually social distancing is very much respected, that everyone wears a mask. So how do you deal with that? Is it a mutating virus, or is it just unlucky?
I don't think the virus is mutating so quickly that it's the main cause of what's going on. I think the virus is, persistent and people travel and then it can, like in this market in Beijing, it can start to spread again. China has, not hesitated to use some pretty aggressive powers to shut down the virus when it starts to move, things that we really wouldn't do in the United States. But even short of that in the United States, I think people have sort of psychologically moved on maybe in some areas, and that creates an even more fertile ground for spread. You really can't compare what's going on in the United States to Beijing. They have a few cases and they're jumping on them in Beijing. In the United States, we have thousands of cases and a lot of community transmission. And, we still haven't, in many areas, built the kind of public health response that's necessary to control it.
In the U.S., do you think there'll be a second lockdown, or at least taking more time in reopening certain states because of the number of infections?
Well, we're already seeing that. Utah, Oregon, and now Texas and New York are talking about that. I think it's, certain that as cases go up, people are going to have to do something about it. Now, whether they have to lock everything down again is going to depend a lot on whether or not we have a robust response capability, that will allow us to stay put for a little bit while the cases go down. And that requires contact tracing, isolation, quarantine, real work in public health. And, I think everyone who doesn't want to shut down should be asking, well, where's the public health response that we can count on?
Josh, talk to me a little bit about some of the evidence that we have on antibody treatment.
So the evidence is starting to accumulate that there may well be a real benefit from antibody treatment or convalescent serum, as it's known. There are studies, I believe, from the UK, from China, from the Middle East that are all suggesting a pretty significant benefit, including potentially mortality when it's used before people are very, very, very sick. So when people are sick but not critically ill and on a ventilator, that appears to be when there's a benefit. And that suggests there may be a benefit even earlier, perhaps, at the beginning of illness or even as a preventive treatment, which, of course, is how antibodies were used in the past. So there's still some major, very well-designed studies that are out there. But right now, it's, I think, considered quite promising.
There's a story on the Bloomberg terminal saying that actually the first COVID vaccines may not prevent you from getting the sickness, but it would prevent you from getting it very badly. Does that go to what we're seeing with antibody treatments?
It's possible. I mean, I saw some speculation. One reason we have so many cases still, but fewer deaths, may be that antibody treatment is being used a lot more in the United States than it was a couple months ago. Now, that's speculation, but it sort of speaks to the idea that, one outcome here is we could have some treatments like remdesivir, antibody treatment, and others that really do help prevent death.
That was Vice Dean Joshua Sharfstein of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Coming up here, stock of the hour, the Supreme Court is actually moving markets today involving natural gas. We'll talk about that next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Reopenings.
Is there a likelihood?
Listen. That's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, rise to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
The Woj Pod with Adrian Wojnarowski.
Doris, you had reason to believe that you needed to get a test for the coronavirus.
Right. Well, let's just start with the headline, which is I did test positive for COVID-19. I was so tired from Saturday the 14th through Tuesday, March 17th. I kid you not, I could not be out of bed for 5 minutes without needing to go back to bed and lay down.
Search the Woj Pod to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man. Welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
30 for 30 is up to bat again with Long Gone Summer, the new documentary chronicling Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa's legendary race to topple the single-season home run record in 1998. Go behind the scenes with TuneIn's Long Gone Summer channel, featuring podcasts like Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show, where they discuss the film with director A.J. Schnock. Plus, keep the nostalgia going with classic game replays from Cubs and Cardinals history. Search Long Gone Summer to listen.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races. To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, then throw the tissue away. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Disinfect surfaces, bottles, handles, knobs, and other places touched often. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the NFL.
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Is listening.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert. Filling in for Smokey, because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Well, the nation is facing a pandemic, an economic downturn, and real race relations issues all at the same time as it heads into an election come this fall. We welcome now the National Press Secretary for Vice President Joe Biden's campaign for presidency. He is T.J. Ducklow, also known as, I believe it is called Tyler Joseph, but I think he goes by T.J. Welcome, Mr. Ducklow. It's great to have you with us. Give us a sense, with like 4.5 months left to go, what's the strategy?
Hey, David. It is great to be with you. Well, look, I think it is clear since the beginning of this coronavirus crisis that Donald Trump has not been up to the job of leading this country. And, you know, it was his inaction and it was his failure to listen to warnings from his own advisors that has led to over 20 million Americans being out of work. You know, and that failure continues because now what you're seeing this week and throughout the country is Donald Trump wants to slap like an open for business sign on the country and hope for the best without doing any of the necessary work to give consumers and workers and small businesses and communities the tools they need to reopen safely and effectively. And that's all the while that, you know, there are 20 plus states who are seeing surges in their number of cases. And so, you know, we have never really had a coherent national public health response that has mobilized the sources we need. And Joe Biden is proposing just that. He is proposing an 8-part plan to make sure that we can safely and strongly reopen. And I can run through that now with you. But the bottom line is, the bottom line is that you know, what we need is a competent federal government and a competent president to be leading the way, and that's just not what we're seeing.
Well, I mean, 8 points maybe a little more much for television, as you know television so well. But give us in a nutshell, on the subject of the economy, what would Joe Biden do that Donald Trump's not doing?
I think one of the biggest things we have seen on the economy, David, is that, you know, Trump has overseen this sort of corrupt recovery, which is no surprise given the way that he has run his administration the last 4 years. You know, we know that this virus is impacting communities of color in a way that is hitting them harder, and that they are dying at higher rates. And this crisis is shining a light and exacerbating a lot of the systemic issues and inequalities in our society that the VP has been talking about for a long time. Things like paid sick leave, things like $15 minimum wage, things like workplace protections. And so we have to start addressing these issues head on, and we have to root them out. And, you know, these are things that Joe Biden has been fighting for his entire career, and that's the kind of thing you will see from him as president.
Well, one of the things we heard just recently from the president with a tweet was he's done more for African Americans in this country in 3.5 years than Joe Biden did in 43 years, is what he said. Mainly because, as you know, the income for African Americans before this recession was going up. Does the president have something of a point there?
No, David, we're also seeing historic unemployment rates for the African American community, hitting those communities harder than it is other folks. I think last month you saw black youth unemployment spike 7 points to 35%, and you're also seeing Hispanic unemployment 4 times higher than it was before Trump botched his response to this pandemic. I think the bottom line on that is that there are over 10 million Americans who had jobs on the day that Barack Obama and Joe Biden left office who are unemployed today, and Donald Trump doesn't have a plan to fix that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Are we going to see more of Vice President Biden than we have in recent past? I mean, you have a challenge because the President of the United States always has a bully pulpit, but boy, this one sure has a bully pulpit, and he uses it regularly.
Well, look, I think we are starting to get out more. You saw it last week, Vice President Biden meeting with folks in downtown Delaware, meeting with mayors, having conversations with faith leaders. I mean, he is doing the things that you would really want to see from a president right now, leading this really incredibly important national converation, and he's proposing real reforms. He is out talking about banning chokeholds. He's talking about creating a national use of force standard. Talking about directing more money to community policing, this is a conversation around systemic racism and around inequality and injustice that is long overdue. It is a conversation that we need to have, and we need to have real reform, and that is what we are out talking about every day with the American people, and that is what Donald Trump continues to fail to lead on.
Yeah, we're going to have a wild 4.5 months here, I think it's fair to say. I really appreciate you being here. That's TJ Duplo. He is National Press Secretary for the Vice President for President campaign. And that does it for the first hour of Balance of Power for today. We will continue on radio for our second hour. We'll be joined, among others, by Maddie Duppler of the National Taxpayers Union, because there's a lot going on with state taxes. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Sephora became the first major retailer to sign on to a pledge to dedicate 15% of its shelf space to products from black-owned businesses. The 15% pledge, a grassroots organizing effort, adds financial muscle to the typical corporate vow of support for the black community and Black Lives Matter movement. Sephora, owned by Paris-based LVMH, has more than 400 stores in the U.S. Sports fans, take note. Major League Soccer is coming back. All 26 MLS clubs will start a month-long tournament July 8th at the Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando, with the regular season continuing in home cities after. Ready for summer vacation? As of July 1st, the EU may be allowing transatlantic tourism, but even if you're flying domestic, United Airlines is requiring its passengers to complete a health screening before boarding. United's self-assessment is one of the furthest reaching efforts among carriers to keep the COVID-19 outbreak in check. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Working from home, take a little more time for breakfast. Tom Keene.
How will this pandemic change your NASDAQ?
Jonathan Farrow.
When you look at that sector, some of these companies won't exist, will they?
And Lisa Abramowitz.
They've only continued to increase the delinquencies and defaults.
Crunch data topped with fresh world news. Bloomberg Surveillance. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. And now, watch us on Bloomberg Television.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks have paired losses as investors debate whether a second wave of pandemic is emerging. S&P 500 index had dropped as much as 2.5% moments ago, just turning positive. Right now, it is flat on the day. We've got NASDAQ up 48. That is a gain of 0.5%. The Dow is down 51 points, down now by 0.2%. The 10-year up 3/32 with a yield of 0.69%. Gold down 0.5%, $17.21 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude advancing now by 1.2%, $36.71 the barrel. And with more on commodities trading on this Monday, here's Bloomberg's Renita Young.
Gold prices are lower today on a stronger U.S. dollar as investors see the dollar as a more attractive haven. And oil extends its losses, fears that a second wave of coronavirus cases could derail the global economy weigh on both commodities. Crude's 6-week rally fizzled on Friday amid concerns the worst of the virus isn't yet over. And as the U.S. Federal Reserve warned, the pandemic could inflict lasting damage on the American economy. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
United Airlines Holdings is planning to raise $5 billion by borrowing against its customer loyalty program, stepping up efforts to boost liquidity amid the COVID-19 pandemic. United says the committed financing will be secured by the Mileage Plus Rewards program. UAL shares, they're down 1.3%. American Airlines, they're up by 0.5%. Delta shares unchanged, and Southwest, rounding out the big four, up now by 1.8%. 1:02 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report, brought to you by SEI. Visionary asset managers find opportunity where others are challenged. Exploit disruption's potential with SEI's global operating platform. Find out how at SEIC.com/IMS. And now with a focus on American depository receipts, here's Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs have rebounded along with U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is down just 0.2% after being lower as much as 2.4% earlier in the day. S&P 500 index, by the way, is now little changed. BP has fallen 2.1% in U.S. trading. The UK energy producer cut oil and gas price estimates through 2050 by as much as 30%. BP will take as much as $17.5 billion in charges and write-offs this quarter. Brazil's Embraer has dropped 5.8%. The head of the regional jet maker's commercial unit, John Slattery, was named CEO-elect of General Electric's aviation business. His departure follows the collapse of Boeing's $4.2 billion deal for Embraer's commercial jet unit. Now, China's BYD has climbed 4.3%. The electric car maker said it will bring in 30 investors for a chip production unit and sell them a combined stake of 7.8%. The deal values the business at about $1.1 billion. And another Chinese company, 58.com, has jumped 9.4%. The provider of online classified ads accepted an $8.7 billion buyout offer from a group backed by U.S. private equity firms Warburg Pincus and General Atlantic, Charlie.
All right, we thank you very much, Dave Wilson, following those American depository receipts. The ownership of nearly $200,000 worth of gold bars left on a Swiss commuter train last year remains a mystery, leaving an even bigger question: who commutes with a bag of gold in the first place? The bars, valued at 182,000 Swiss francs, roughly $190,000, were found last October inside a parcel on a train bound for the lakeside city of Lucerne, according to a June 2nd notice in a local newspaper. Again, recapping here, equities now trading mixed with the S&P up by 0.5 point. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Markets are hit again by concerns over more coronavirus cases in some states. All that working from home could make state tax revenues problematic. And employers ask returning employees to sign waivers if they want to come back to the office. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. The Trump campaign reportedly will ask people coming to rallies to sign waivers, agreeing not to sue if their participation leads to their contracting COVID-19. And increasingly, it appears that many employers may do the same thing. Is it lawful? Is it enforceable? For some answers, we welcome now Catherine Sharkey. She is Crystal Eastman Professor of Law. Professor Sharkey is the co-author of a leading textbook on tort law and an advisor on the third restatement of torts, which is a big deal. Welcome, Professor. It's really good to have you with us. So I got asked by a lot of colleagues when this news broke, can they really do that? And what is the answer? If they say everybody has to sign this waiver, is it effective?
They certainly can do it, and then the interesting legal question, is it effective, raises the question of whether courts would enforce it. And I think there are two things to think about here. One is courts typically look askance at very broad waivers, and secondly, they very much scrutinize whether individuals are voluntarily exposing themselves to reasonable levels of risk.
And one of the questions is, for me, if the employer says you either come back or you lose your job, and to come back you have to sign this waiver, that's one thing. If they say it's fine for you to work from home, it's your choice whether to come back in, does that make a difference as to whether the courts might find it reasonable to enforce a waiver?
Yeah, well, so here's the thing. The employment context is rather different. And so there's a long history of tort law where in the 19th century, judges would say things like, you voluntarily exposed yourself to this risk because if you didn't like it, you could leave, even if that meant you had no other job. But of course, the history has led to a situation where we have workers' compensation, which is basically a kind of quid pro quo or trade-off. Namely, employers can't raise assumption of the risk defenses, but on the other hand, they're only having to cover certain types of injuries that arise during the workplace for certain kinds of injuries at a kind of reasonable rate of damages. So we've treated historically risks that arise in the workplace differently from risks that we would maybe encounter in spectator sports or, for example, in the rally context that was alluded to.
How would workers' compensation work when it comes to COVID-19? Would it be covered?
Well, it's going to be there's a very fact-based type question and one that would probably be litigated, but with respect to if individuals can show that they are, accidents or illnesses that arise during the course of work, they should be covered under workman's compensation.
But that would limit the damages.
Absolutely, right. It's basically like an administrative no-fault system with regulated damages at certain levels.
What about the public policy concerns here? Because one of the issues coming up with respect to proposals in Congress about limiting liability is you're letting the employer off the hook, and it reduces the employer's incentive to try to protect the workers. If they got blanket waivers of liability, is there an issue here that they might not work as hard to sanitize, to provide masks, to take temperatures, all the things people are talking about?
Sure. So I think sometimes people forget that the purpose of tort liability is not just to compensate people when they're injured, but is to serve this deterrence role, right? It's a form of quasi-regulation. But just stating that now, I introduced the idea that it's a kind of balance between tort liability suits and regulations. So if companies, for example, are following federal regulations, guidelines, et cetera, they're going to have a very strong argument that they were reasonably managing these risks.
To what extent are states taking a look at limiting liability themselves? Because you could have a patchwork across 50 states in the District of Columbia instead of a national standard.
Absolutely, and with tort law, we see that. We basically have state-by-state rules of liability, and then we have, areas of federal regulation. So, for example, drugs or medical devices are regulated at a national level, but we do leave states to come up with their own determinations of liability and their own standards for workplace injuries and workers' compensation.
So I think probably all of us, most of us think this is a truly extraordinary circumstance, this pandemic, once 100 years, if that. But is it really extraordinary from the point of view of tort law and the structure, or is this just another one?
Well, so here's the other aspect that I think makes this a kind of unique type risk is that unlike, for example, if I'm going skiing and I can waive my right to sue for any kind of negligence that happened on the slopes, I take the benefit of that activity, downhill skiing, but I also suffer the consequences, namely, if I'm injured, I can't sue. But with the COVID risk, this is a kind of risk that an individual might think they're taking on, but actually they're spreading that risk to others in society. So to their families, to their communities, their workplaces, their schools, and the like. And given that societal element, my own view is that it calls for a wider berth for thinking about regulating those risks, whether through tort liability suits or federal regulation.
But is that things like OSHA? Are you thinking about
OSHA is one example. And there's some interesting pending litigation, right, about the interplay between federal regulators and state tort liability. But absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Really appreciate you being with us. It's great to have a true authority on tort law. That is Professor Catherine Sharkey of the NYU Law School. Coming up here, Noah Smith of Bloomberg Opinion is here on why he thinks we shouldn't give up, at least yet, on President Trump's promise to bring manufacturing back to the United States, although the reason it comes back may not have been the way that President Trump thought it would. That's coming up next on our Bloomberg Opinion segment. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Coronavirus proved that every aspect of our lives, from business to health, is connected to Asia.
Healthcare firms testing the appetite for IPOs in Hong Kong too.
But you already knew that.
COVID-19 certainly had an impact on this.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern.
What does that mean for Asia if the dollar remains on the back foot for the foreseeable future?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Bloomberg and Eaton Vance are proud to present a Boston Pop salute to our heroes. This Independence Day, the fireworks won't take place, but the orchestra's 4th of July tradition will continue. The program will feature guest artists and new music paying tribute to the heroes of the current health crisis and honoring the memories of those we have lost. Watch and listen July 4th starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Bloomberg Television and right here on Bloomberg Radio.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus.
At Honda, we've never looked to other car companies for inspiration. No, it's not a matter of an inflated ego. We just prefer listening to what people really need. For example, the new Honda Jazz Hybrid doesn't have the expected 6 airbags. It has 10, including one that prevents the driver and passenger from colliding with each other. And because we also listen to our conscience, all our safety features come as standard. No charge. Honda. The power of dreams.
We're all having to get used to the new normal, and at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed, retrieve data fast. Scalability, grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity, easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. You can do your bit by continuing to work from home if you can and avoiding public transport. If you have to use public transport, from today you must now wear a face covering at all times. Avoid peak hours and wash your hands before and after travel. For everyone's safety, we regularly clean our services with antiviral disinfectant and will be providing hand sanitizer across our network. For more information, search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
At Asda, we've provided 3,500 care homes with priority access to delivery slots, and priority shopping hours are open to our care workers. We're also donating 250,000 face masks to care homes. Asda, we're all in this together. Please show ID for priority shopping. Check asda.com for times.
Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB? On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Braden and Jared Carrabis cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, they are all higher right now. Green on the screen. The Dow wiping out a 3% loss. It is up now by 0.1%. Dow Jones Industrial Average up 26 points at 25,631. Investors continue to debate whether a second wave of the pandemic is emerging. S&P 500 index have been down as much as 2.5%. It is now up by 0.3%. S&P now at 3,050, up by 9 points. NASDAQ up 79. That is a gain of 0.8%. The 10-year up 1/32 with a yield now of just about 0.69%. Gold down 0.6%, 17.20 the ounce. And crude now up by 1.5%, 36.78 a barrel. Recapping equities reverse course higher across the board now with the S&P up 7, up 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's time now for Bloomberg Opinion. Welcome today, columnist Noah Smith. Noah, welcome. Good to have you. I'll read the title. It's Don't Give Up on Bringing Manufacturing Back to the United States. That's something that President Trump promised he'd do, didn't quite get done, but you think there's still a chance?
Right. I think it's going to be a very long-term fight. You know, it's Trump's methods obviously failed, but it's still something that we should do.
So it's interesting you said Trump's methods failed. I assume you're talking about tariffs first and foremost. Use 323 and 301 and all those sections we've learned in the trade laws. But so is it clear that has failed, that has not brought manufacturing back onto shore?
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely clear. You can see it in all the statistics. Manufacturing has not been reshored to any appreciable amount. In fact, even before coronavirus, like we failed to attain our previous peak of manufacturing from before 2008. So it really just didn't happen. Supply chains have become more concentrated in East Asia rather than less. And in fact, we have a good idea as to why tariffs are not effectual here, which is that, most tariffs end up falling on intermediate goods. So, for example, you put a tax on imports of some low value steel part. Well, that makes it more expensive for GM or whoever to manufacture high value cars and stuff here. So you're actually taxing your own manufacturers with a lot of these tariffs.
But no, it wasn't just the tariffs, right? It was also changes in the tax laws, both allowing them to bring capital back onshore from offshore and also to expense capital investment. It was thought, it was claimed by the administration, that would really lead to a lot of investment, capital investment in manufacturing. That didn't work. Why? Because it just wasn't enough?
It turns out that those taxes weren't a huge factor in companies' decisions of whether to invest in manufacturing in the U.S. It just, was a very small marginal factor. And, that tax reform was very complex. It had a lot of moving parts, and tax professors are still trying to analyze, what it helped and what it hurt. But I think the big conclusion we can draw is it just, didn't have a huge appreciable effect at the macro level.
But moving away from the government, what the government has or has not done, you suggest that there may be some larger factors at play here. I guess one of them might be the pandemic itself as companies are rethinking their supply chains.
Right. So that actually does present us with an opportunity for reshoring because, first of all, companies are going to realize, oh my gosh, our supply chains could get cut off within a day. And it was a pandemic this time. It could be, a war next time. Suppose there's some ships shoot at each other in the South China Sea, and suddenly everything from China or even everything from East Asia gets closed down. We need essential supply chains here. So that's going to affect companies' decisions about risk.
Now, historically, what little I understand the theory of comparative advantage would say that would be less efficient and less pro-growth. But you found some people who are suggesting that may not be true. It goes to the very fundamentals of at least comparative advantage as I understood it, to say actually you might get more innovation and productivity by bringing things back on shore, keeping them local.
That's right. So comparative advantage is a very simple theory, and we've known for a long time that there's more going on in trade than just comparative advantage. It is one aspect, but it's only one aspect. So there's also something called knowledge spillovers, where basically if you have a bunch of so for example, battery making companies in a place, then that tends to also promote the local electronics industry because people who know about the batteries can then go start electronics companies and make gadgets that use the batteries because they understand the batteries more. And so there's some of these knowledge spillovers through supply chains that, comparative advantage doesn't really take into account. And so some economists have found that countries that make a wider variety of products actually tend to grow faster over time. So Ricardo Hausman's an economist who's found that. And so we don't really know about a lot of this stuff. There's, conventional wisdom is hundreds of years old, but it's just a lot more complicated than that. So we're still learning how this works, but there's arguments on both sides.
And what is the role of the government, if any, in a new way of having things more local? I mean, the theory of comparative advantage suggests that if you get the government out of the way, you take all the tariffs off, it'll correct itself. Is the same thing true here? People, as they look at the supply chains and problems of the pandemic, companies will just correct it themselves, or is there a role for government intervention of some sort?
Well, tariffs probably are bad. I mean, they certainly haven't worked. But there's other things government can do. There's, of course, capacity building. There's providing things like, infrastructure and research. So there's this new bill called the Endless Frontier Act that I really like that would, start in reinvigorating publicly funded research, which is the type that private companies tend not to do on their own. And so there's that. And then, some other people are exploring ideas where the government can, help companies coordinate to create these local clusters of manufacturing, local networks, and supply chains. And I would say that the jury's still out on that. We don't know whether that's good or bad, but it's something we should probably be thinking about and experimenting with because, the United States really, North America really is losing its status as a sort of a center of supply chains to other countries. And it's an important question whether or not we should try to become a center of supply chains again.
Yeah, interestingly, you may be too young to remember, but in the 80s, Japan tried this with MITI, M-I-T-I, and industrial policy, right? It didn't work so well. Why would it work better here?
Well, MITI actually had a lot of successes in the late 60s and 70s, and then in the 80s, it really started failing. So it was very, very good at helping companies build like clusters of auto manufacturing and machine tool manufacturing, where Japan still dominates a very high value industry. It was not successful at electronics, semiconductors, or things like that.
Fascinating. It's a really interesting article. I really recommend it to everybody. Thanks to Bloomberg columnist Noah Smith. And you can read more on this and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing in OPI and go. Next, we're going to talk about taxes in the states and the problems they're having. That's coming up on Bloomberg Balance of Power.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mixed, cutting earlier losses as investors debate whether a second wave of coronavirus cases are emerging. The Dow is falling 85 points, S&P down 3, but the Nasdaq is up 38 points. Shares of Hertz are down 18% as it prepares to sell $500 million in new stock. There may be a buyer for bankrupt department store chain JCPenney. Bloomberg has learned that Authentic Brands Group and two of the largest mall landlords, Simon Property and Brookfield Property, are in talks. They're trying to buy JCPenney as part of the chain's court reorganization. And the Fed has opened its Main Street lending program for small and mid-sized businesses. The program will lend up to $600 billion in loans, ranging from $250,000 to $3 million. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. Market upheavals.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed. Retrieve data fast. Scalability. Grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity. Easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
If you have to drive, then it's more important than ever to watch your speed. As London starts to reopen, there are going to be more people on our streets. There'll be more people cycling, more people walking to work or to the shops. If you must drive, avoid the morning and evening peaks when the roads will be busier. We want the streets to be safe for everyone, all the time. So watch your speed. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At Asda, we're helping you shop safely by keeping our stores clean and limiting customer numbers so you can keep 2 meters apart. With our Scan and Go mobile app, you can reduce contact at the till too. Asda, we're all in this together. Subject to availability. Mobile data charges may apply.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races. Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, right to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free. To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Remember, 6 feet, it's the rule. Stay your distance and always wear a mask while you're out. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
This is Darren Waller. Good to have you.
Yes, sir. It's good to be here.
Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Big member of our NFL alumni family, the CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president, Mr. Eric Price. Good to see you.
Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, it's bad enough that states have had the increased cost of fighting the pandemic. Now they have to address their revenue base. Maddie Doppler of the National Taxpayers Union will help us do just that. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
And I thank you very much, David Weston. Here's what's going on. We have got the Dow, the S&P, now lower. It's been that kind of a day. A lot of volatility. NASDAQ holding on to a gain right now, up by 55 points. That is an advance of just about 0.6%. Last update, we did have the Dow turning around, but right now the Dow is down 90 points, lower by 0.3%. Worst level of the day, the Dow had been down 3%. Again, down now by 0.3%. S&P lower by a point, down about 0.1%, while NASDAQ is up 53. That is a gain of 0.6%. Bottom line here, stocks are fluctuating after erasing losses in the wake of a report. The U.S. will allow American companies to work with China's Huawei to develop standards. So the Dow, the S&P trading lower right now. Indeed, it is a mixed session. As for markets, the economy and coronavirus, Jim Paulson is Chief Investment Strategist at Luthold Whedon Capital Management.
I think a year from now, the market will be higher and the multiple will be lower because earnings will also come back and probably go up faster than the stock market. So I don't think we're going to keep going up at the same pace we have been. I think it's going to be more choppy and not as fast. But I still think we've started the new expansion. And if we have, then I think we're early yet in this bull market.
BP will make the biggest write-down on the value of its business since the Deepwater Horizon disaster a decade ago, as the coronavirus pandemic hurts long-term oil demand and accelerates the shift to cleaner energy. West Texas Intermediate up 1% right now, 36.31 ADRs of BP. They are trading lower by 2.4%. Among some of the other big, well-known energy names, ExxonMobil down 0.8%, EOG Resources down 1.3%, and Pioneer Natural Resources down 2.6%. 10-year yield, 0.69%. Gold down 0.6%, $17.21 the ounce. So again, a volatile back-to-work Monday with the S&P now lower by a point, down less than 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. And once again, here's your host, David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. The fight against the coronavirus started with shutting down the economy and shoring up the healthcare system. But now, as states begin to come back to life, they have to figure out how their tax base is affected by things like working from home. Maddie Doppler is Senior Fellow at the National Taxpayers Union and is the founder and president of Forward Strategy. So, Maddie, great to have you back with us. Appreciate it. So I've read a fair amount about this now. Take us through the most basics here. How are state taxes, income taxes I'm talking about here, how are they really assessed? Is it where you live, where you work, a combination of the two? Because they may not be the same place.
That's exactly right, David. And this has come to the forefront now that people are working from home, which may be a different jurisdiction than where you work. I had a lot of friends in the D.C. area where I live asking me, what do you mean this is different from where I work? I live in D.C., I work in Virginia, or vice versa, and I've always paid taxes where I live. That's because an area like D.C. has a reciprocity agreement that shields taxpayers from having to make that calculation when you cross the river into a different jurisdiction. But typically, you're paying taxes where you work. So that means if you're someone who typically commutes into a different state for work, and now you're working from home, you may be facing an additional tax burden. Now, some states have come out and clarified that they're not going to try and exert taxes on the work that you're doing at home, because obviously these are unusual times where folks are working from home from circumstances not of their own making. But other states, such as New York, which has been very aggressive in the past in trying to look for revenue that is earned in that state and tax it, has said, listen, if you're working here, you're not used to, that's income that we get to tax. And taxpayers there may be slated for an unexpected surprise as a result.
Well, but New York, let's take New York, for example, because I have a little bit of experience there. They have, at least in the past, been very aggressive in saying if you spend a part of half of the days of the year in the state, then you're subject to New York state tax. Why doesn't that turn around and cut the other way if, in fact, you're staying in New Jersey for all your time, or Connecticut, or Pennsylvania, or something?
Right, exactly. So if you're not actually working in a state that you're used to, why don't you get a rebate? Well, of course, the tax system is typically not organized that way. We have a saying in tax advocacy that a lot of times when it comes to the IRS, you are guilty until proven innocent. And that's because these tax administration issues are very, very difficult. And unfortunately for taxpayers, this is a circumstance that was not anticipated when the shutdowns first started, the fact that we were going to have all of these remote work and nexus issues. Now, I do think that this was a tax issue that was essentially sitting on the horizon as working from home becomes more common before the coronavirus. I mean, this became one of the more popular commutes according to the Census Bureau last year. More people are working from home than are commuting by transit. So it was a tax issue that was going to have to be confronted at some point, but unfortunately, we don't have a solution yet. It is our hope at NTU that Congress will look at this issue, and in the next round of legislating when it comes to coronavirus, they will clarify that taxpayers cannot be subject to new taxation as a result of working from home.
Well, that's interesting. Good luck with getting that passed. At the same time, when you say New York is being really tough, in fairness to New York, they've got a big problem. There's a big revenue shortfall in addition to increased costs and things. Where, besides trying to make sure they get all the income tax they can get, where can they look for some possible revenue sources? Are there other taxes they're considering imposing?
Well, New York has had a problem for many, many years as a result of relying on a shrinking tax base for a lot of its services. And of course, what I'm talking about are high-income earners. New York really likes to go after those high-income earners, and as a result, a lot of those payers are voting with their feet and leaving the jurisdiction. So the challenge right now for states, of course, is that they're under an enormous burden. Specifically, their unemployment insurance programs are the ones that are bearing the brunt of the coronavirus shutdown. Now, the federal government did step in to allow for more money to go to those insurance programs so that states can keep them afloat. I anticipate that Congress will provide another infusion of those funds in order to keep those UI programs working. But we've had a real challenge at the state level with those programs not being able to deal with the influx of the folks trying to apply for benefits. So that, I think, speaks again to a problem that was maybe sitting on the horizon that public policymakers didn't anticipate. The fact that we've got a social safety net that doesn't work very well. If it doesn't work very well, it can't process revenue very efficiently, and it can't process payments very efficiently, which, when you're in the middle of a crisis, is the most necessary component of a social safety net. So New York will probably be looking for an infusion from the federal government, and it will probably be looking to increase taxes at some point if they can't get that federal money in the door. My perspective is that it makes sense right now for the federal government to be providing some support for these systems so they can prevent states from having to implement long-term tax increases in order to provide for a short-term revenue shortfall in those UI systems.
Well, that just pushes the problem from one place to another, doesn't it? Because the government is spending the federal government in Washington is spending trillions of dollars. At some point, I assume we're going to have to pay some of it back. We're going to have to take a look at the federal tax system, in particular things like the corporate rate that got cut so much, and capital gains taxes and things like that, to try to raise some revenues at the federal level.
You're absolutely right, David, that the pressures that the federal budget is under right now are also unprecedented. The federal government, in conjunction with the Federal Reserve, has a lot more power and tools at its disposal to try and blunt some of the impact of these shortfalls at the state level. So I'm hoping we leverage some of those resources in order to keep the bottom line for federal taxpayers a little bit lower. But over time, we are going to have to look at an increase in federal spending and what it costs us. I think that right now we are in circumstances that indicate how important it is to have prudent federal finance systems in order. We need to have the fiscal space in order to respond to exigent circumstances such as we're experiencing right now. The fact that we haven't had that fiscal space in the past because spending has been too high, I think indicates that we need to look at our long-term spending practices and acknowledge that in order to preserve that fiscal space, we're going to have to make changes in the future.
Sounds really sensible. Also, very difficult to get elected on that platform in most jurisdictions I'm aware of, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. It's a tragic amount of Maddie. By the way, at the very last question, what are the prospects of getting that passed, of the sort of coordination among states that nobody can increase taxes because of the pandemic?
Well, I think right now all eyes are on Washington as negotiations continue about what a phase 4 coronavirus package will look like. Right now, states are beholden to the federal government when it comes to UI taxes.
No question about that. Okay, thank you so much. Always great to have you with us. That's Maddie Duppler of the National Taxpayers Union. Coming up here, the Supreme Court rules that Title VII protections extend to LGBTQ employees. Greg Storr is here to take us through the decision out just today. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
The world's financial decision.
Listen. That's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
At Wix, we know tradespeople have been keeping the homes of the UK safe and sound, so we know you need to get back out on the job quickly. Get instant access to your 10% discount with the Wix Trade Pro app and shop with us in store, click and collect, or have your order delivered. Not a member? Download the app to register. Always cheaper with Wix Trade Pro. Terms apply.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. You can do your bit by continuing to work from home if you can and avoiding public transport. If you have to use public transport, from today you must now wear a face covering at all times, avoid peak hours and wash your hands before and after travel. For everyone's safety, we regularly clean our services with antiviral disinfectant and will be providing hand sanitizer across our network. For more information, search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Who says you can't have a laugh while getting serious about America's pastime? On the daily podcast Locked On MLB, comedian and baseball fanatic Paul Francis Sullivan talks about each team, each pennant race, and everything else in the game, from rule changes and controversies to baseball cards and stadium food.
For those of you who are not familiar with me or the old show, I love to obsess over baseball. I'm talking baseball over the Super Bowl. We had a TV showing the division series during my wedding.
Search Locked On MLB on TuneIn to listen today.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
Mr. Darren Waller, good to have you.
Yes, sir, it's good to be here.
Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Big member of our NFL alumni family, the CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president, Mr. Eric Price. Good to see you.
Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Kevin Clark.
If Josh Allen became the 10th best quarterback in football this year, they'd probably win 14 games. Am I wrong about that?
No. If you as a quarterback can't win in the Bills' situation right now, they should not extend you. So many teams, Jets, do not have the information they need to evaluate their quarterbacks based on the teams they've built around them. The Bills do.
Listen and subscribe to the Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Search the Mina Kimes Show to listen.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. A mixed Monday here. Stocks are fluctuating after erasing losses in the wake of a report that the U.S. will allow American companies to work with China's Huawei to develop standards. S&P 500 index now little change, down about 0.1% after slumping as much as 2.5% amid concern a second wave of the coronavirus pandemic is emerging. Oil futures have rebounded after slumping to around $35 a barrel in New York. Right now, West Texas Intermediate, $36.54, up 0.8%. S&P is down 4, down about 0.1%. The Dow is down 107 points, down 0.4%, have been down more than 700 at the worst level of the session. NASDAQ holding on to a 49-point gain, now up by 0.5%. 10-year, the yield there, 0.68%, up 4/32. Gold is down 0.5%, 17.22 the ounce. Again, recapping, equities are trading mixed with the S&P down 4, a drop of about 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From New York, this is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act forbids employers from discriminating based on sex. We all knew that applied to unjustified different treatment of men and based on sexual orientation rather than on gender. In a 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court has now ruled definitively, and Bloomberg Supreme Court reporter Greg Storr is here to take us through what the court
says. You cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. That includes discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Those workers are now protected and cannot be fired because of their sexual orientation or gender identity.
Which may be one of the reasons we've seen some of the big companies react positively to this, because quite apart from the merits, they just want one rule. And if you employ people across the United States and you have different states with different protections, it makes it complicated.
Yeah, it is, and that's an argument we see employers make and companies make in a lot of contexts, that they don't want this patchwork of regulations. They also say, look, we want to have diverse workforces and we want to be supportive of all of our workers, and having a law like this where we know that those workers are entitled to civil rights protections actually helps us foster an inclusive workplace.
So it wasn't just the ruling, which is important, very important to a lot of people in itself, but also how the voting broke down, because there were a couple that
more liberals in the majority. The ruling, Justice Gorsuch wrote the ruling. It was very much focused on statutory interpretation. He said, that word sex is so intertwined with sexual orientation and gender identity that the only thing I can do is conclude that it includes it. Other conservative justices, Justice Alito, Thomas, Kavanaugh, dissented. They said that is not at all what Congress had in mind when it passed.
Fascinating to me, the two sides and their arguments could have invoked the same thing on the other side in a different case. I mean, on the one hand, you had the majority saying the language is plain when the language is plain in Congress itself.
Yeah, and that's the reality when you're interpreting a statute. It's Justice Scalia is sort of the godfather of this, saying we're just going to interpret the words of it. But sometimes words can be ambiguous and they can mean different things to different people. And here we saw the conservatives split off into the camps of those who thought the word sex clearly incorporates sexual orientation and gender identity, and those justices who said it doesn't.
Now, Chief Justice Roberts joined in Justice Gorsuch's opinion. He had ruled the other way on some other issues having to do with sexual orientation, but I wonder if it made a big difference. This was statutory rather than constitutional.
Yeah, Chief Justice Roberts was probably the biggest surprise, for me at least, in this opinion, in that we saw an argument that Justice Gorsuch in the past, and you're right, those had been constitutional cases like the 2015 case involving the right to marry. He has always been get married. Certainly that it is possible. We didn't get a separate opinion from him, so we're speculating a little bit, but certainly it is possible putting a statute rather than a constitutional provision.
And less sweeping in part because I know in prior Supreme Courts they've said, look, if we get this wrong, the Congress can change it. Different thing.
Yes, absolutely, and that could well have been animating this decision as well. That said, one of the points that Justice Alito made in his dissent intersect with this right not to be discriminated against, and those are things that are better left to the legislature to decide. It's possible Congress will come along in a general rule that you cannot discriminate on the basis of LGBT status.
But when I read it, I thought just exactly that boy, what's going to happen with a lot of the religious organizations who employ people handle? So we're probably fomenting a fair amount of more litigation. We haven't heard the last word on this, I suspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that Justice Gorsuch talked about in his override other statutes like Title